in opposition to this measure.
Please proceed.
I want to thank the two chairs. I think they did a much better job than our counterparts. They did let everyone testify who showed up, and I appreciate that, Mr. Speaker. And this has been a long and grueling process, and I am about out of gas. Running on coffee right now, 4 hours sleep, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, I oppose this measure for a myriad of reasons, but the least of which, I believe it's unconstitutional. Let me explain. Mr. Speaker, in 1998, we told the voters, the state of Hawaii, through the Office of Elections, publicly funded informational documents that, and I quote verbatim, a yes vote would add a new provision to the Constitution that would give the legislature the power to reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples only. Now, the emphasis added, of course, was my own there, but that's the verbatim language. The two key words to me, Mr. Speaker, are reserve and only. Reserve means to keep, to hold, to secure, to set aside. When I make a car reservation, they're supposed to hold it for me. Only means alone in a kind of class, standing alone by reason of superiority, and finally, it means and nothing else more. Now, those are the words, Mr. Speaker, that we sent out to every registered voter in 1998. Those are the words that the state funded. The state has a responsibility to those voters. We're going to hear talk about justice, and fairness, and equity. What about the justice and fairness and equity for the voters who cast their ballot based on this informational document that the Office of Elections sent out to every registered voter? And they also advertised in the daily papers every week for a month. Well, I think the daily paper has forgotten that, but nevertheless, it is true, Mr. Speaker. A yes vote would add a new provision to the Constitution that would give the legislature the power to reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples. Mr. Speaker, that's plain language, and I'm a plain man. I can look at that all day, every day, and twice on Sundays, and I do not see how that gives us the authority to pass a same-sex marriage statute. In fact, whatever authority we had on marriage, this supersedes it. You see, Mr. Speaker, there'll be talk about legislative intent and committee reports, but all that is dwarfed by the power of the people, who we derive our power from when it is expressed in a constitutional amendment. A constitutional amendment is a basketball. A committee report is a pebble. I can't believe I'm the only one who sees this. We have a lot of lawyers in here, and I'm sure they will explain away the language. But again, Mr. Speaker, there is United States Supreme Court law that says the intent of the voters on a constitutional amendment trumps any statutory language, trumps any committee reports, trumps all this stuff. Now, Mr. Speaker, we'll get our day to argue that next week. But it's not the first time I brought it up. What about the fairness and equity for the voters who cast their ballot in 1998? We are telling them that somehow this meant same-sex marriage. It did not. And I will close with an honest man's pillow is his peace of mind. Thank you.
All right,
Speaker?
Representative, thank you very much. Further discussion.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Maktakai,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Request a ruling on a potential conflict of interest.
state your ruling.
According to Department of Defense Directive 134410, use of military ranks, job titles, and photographs in uniform do not express or imply endorsement by the Hawaii Army National Guard, the Department of the Army, or the Department of Defense. I am, Mr. Speaker, a member of the Hawaii Army National Guard.
No conflict, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please
Request
proceed.
also permission to insert other written comments in support.
So ordered.
Thank you. Request your permission, Mr. Speaker, to insert a memorandum from Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, dated August 13, 2013, subject, extending benefits to same-sex spouses of military members, Mr. Speaker.
So ordered.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Speaker, request permission to insert a memorandum from the Undersecretary of Defense Jessica Wright, dated August 13, 2013, subject, further guidance on extending benefits to same-sex spouses of military members.
So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this measure.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to first acknowledge the thousands of people who have contacted our office, both in favor and against this bill. People have visited our offices, some have written or called, and many have emailed. As of last night, approximately 7,300 have contacted our office in support, and 6,200 have contacted our office opposed. I thank everyone who has contacted me, and I thank them all for participating in the legislative process. And although I couldn't respond to every single person who contacted me, I hope that my words today help them understand my thoughts and my decision on this bill. My first day on the job was November 8, 1994, exactly 19 years ago today. I mention this, Mr. Speaker, because like today, this issue was front and center in 1994. Many of the concerns raised by opponents are the same as the 1990s. But times change, Mr. Speaker. Times change, people change, and I've changed. In a year, I will be a former member of this House. I have chosen to leave after 20 great years. Some people have accused me of voting in support of this bill because of my desires to be the next congressman from Hawaii. Nothing can be further from the truth. I am voting yes because it is the right thing to do. Since the ruling earlier this summer by the U.S. Supreme Court on Article 3 of the Defense of Marriage Act, this issue has had widespread attention in Hawaii and throughout the nation. I have served alongside gays and lesbians as a member of the Hawaii National Guard. The service members who I have worked with during my 14 years in the National Guard have underscored the importance of treating everyone fairly. Our LGBT veterans love this country as much as I do. They fought and some have died. When I was deployed to the Middle East in 2009, our military family took care of my family, my wife and our 2 kids. Deployments are stressful, and couples in the military, no matter if they are straight or gay, need this support. I'm pleased with the leadership taken by Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel and by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Secretary Hagel states, "It is now the department's policy to treat all married military personnel equally. The department will work to make the same benefits available to all military spouses, regardless of whether they are in same-sex or opposite-sex marriages." Unquote. Legal federal benefits are being provided to same-sex military families in Hawaii now. This bill will provide the same benefits to our local same-sex families as our military same-sex families are already receiving. My yes vote for this bill is a vote for love, equality, and fairness. Actually, Mr. Speaker, the truth is there have been very hurtful words said about me by some of those who I've respected. Some have questioned my motives. Some have threatened to abandon me. I've had numerous church bulletins singling me out. I've had not one, but 2 brochures mailed to our community from First Assembly of God and New Hope Leeward. But despite these hateful and negative tactics, I'm at peace. I made my final decision on this bill after speaking with my wife, Sammy, who thanked me for this vote. She thanked me, Mr. Speaker. In my 19 years in this House, my wife hasn't said a word about any of my previous votes. But for this vote, definitely one of the most challenging. This vote means a lot to her, and it means a lot to me. I'm at peace, and I'm in a good place, Mr. Speaker, because I know my yes vote today is righteous and pono. This is my chance to make the correct choice and to do the right thing. I will not have another chance here on this floor to vote yes. And 20 years from now, I want to look back on my legislative career with no regrets. There are many who say that they are opposing this bill because of their religion. They cite the separation of church and state.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes,
I yield my
Representative.
time.
So ordered.
Thank you, Representative. However, there are many religions, there are many pastors, many Christian pastors who support this bill. I support this bill because of the separation of church and state. If you and your church do not support marriage equality, then you are not forced to marry same-sex couples. You will not be forced to have gay weddings in your church. But this bill gives the churches that embraces all couples, no matter if their gender persuasion, gay, lesbian, or straight, this bill gives these loving, committed couples the right to marry in churches that welcome them. Why can't couples who care so much for each other have the same wonderful marriage that we have, Mr. Speaker? Why can't churches that love these couples and that want to marry these couples do so? Why not, Mr. Speaker? The essence of our islands is captured in the Hawaii state law. The Aloha Spirit is defined by state law, and I quote, "The Aloha Spirit is the coordination of mind and heart within each person. Aloha is the essence of relationships in which each person is important to every other person for collective existence," unquote. That's in state law, Mr. Speaker. I didn't make it up. In my mind and the deepest fibers of my heart, I believe that it is time that our laws reflect the Aloha Spirit. We are the Aloha State, and Aloha means love. And this bill, Mr. Speaker, is all about love. It is my heartfelt honor and my privilege that for marriage equality in Hawaii, I vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Representative. Further discussion? Yes, Representative Brower.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In support.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, like so many single men who live in Waikiki, I live the lifestyle of an openly straight heterosexual male, raised Roman Catholic. And as many testifiers have said at our 6 days of hearings, now let me say it. I have friends who are gay. I don't hate gay people. As a longtime resident of Waikiki, I've met people who are gay, quasi-gay, Gaysian, bisexual, metrosexual, pansexual, heteroflexible, fa'afina, transgendered, androgynous, mahu, and a granny who was a tranny. And while we are tolerant of different cultures in Hawaii's melting pot, the majority must strive to be tolerant of someone who is different. And people of alternative lifestyles must be respectful of society's norm. The strongest of all human qualities is acceptance. And through acceptance, we achieve wisdom and that helps us to reach our full human and cosmic potential. Because you are a spiritual being having a human experience. And today is an opportunity for people on both sides of this issue to show the world that you have what it takes to evolve to higher standards. Personally speaking, the issue of same-sex marriage was not on my legislative priority list, not on my radar or my gaydar. But similar to how a fireman must go into a burning building, a legislator must go to where the controversy is with conviction, without excuses, when called to a special session. Personal feelings should influence but not overrule a legislator's objective thoughts and behavior. That is why I listened to the testifiers on both sides of the issue on this topic. Truth, Mr. Speaker, exists on both sides. I'm supporting this bill because it's the duty of state government to help minority groups, especially when the group is asking for what many consider logical, rational, and fair. I believe that intimate monogamous relationships with people taking care of people is the backbone of a strong society. And I have such respect for marriage, I'm not sure I can achieve it because I want it to be such a soulmate connection. I notice, figuratively speaking, this bill has all the same DNA as Hawaii's heterosexual marriage law, all the same rights, benefits, and protections. The only point of contention is the 8-letter word marriage. Most against the bill say it is because it includes the word marriage. But it would be illogical to call the law anything else other than marriage. What are we going to name it? I can't believe it's not marriage, or marriage with an asterisk, or marriage in quotation marks, or marriage wink wink, or hashtag marriage. I'm not religious in the traditional sense. I believe I have a relationship with God, and I ask for his guidance, and I ask guidance from his partner, Jesus. Perhaps God does not approve of homosexuality. It's not how he intended things to be, but neither, Mr. Speaker, is a lot of what we see in today's, quote, normal heterosexual lifestyle. Spiritually, I do not feel that legalized same-sex marriage will make our state any more or less moral than it is or will be. In the eyes of God, how is same-sex marriage any different than same-sex couples living together monogamously without the marriage license? I encourage Christians to be more concerned with the actions of people who call themselves Christians than gay people calling themselves married. Isn't our faith in the institution of marriage between a man and a woman strong enough to withstand an adjustment to its definition? This bill does not redefine God or the Bible's idea of marriage. It does not mean that gay is the new straight. It only readjusts or expands the state of Hawaii's definition of marriage. And perhaps it just declares that love is the answer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Representative Furter. Yes, Representative Woolley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support.
Please proceed, Representative.
Thank you. This process has been long and painful, but it has helped us all learn a lot about ourselves, our beliefs, and about each other. I want to thank everyone who talked to me about this issue, testified, emailed, called, sang, or blessed me. I listened and I learned a lot. Throughout these deliberations, I have been guided by the oaths I took to defend and protect the constitutions of the United States of America and Hawaii. And during the challenging hearing process, I listened and read testimony, and I searched for guidance from leaders past and present. In 1970, Governor John Burns allowed Hawaii's abortion statute to become law without his signature. Governor Burns said, quote, He must never let his private political and religious convictions unduly influence his judgment as governor of all the people. He continued, in the recent debates and public controversy over proposed abortion law changes in our state, I have been subjected to pleadings, warnings, even threats from many sources, including clergymen and lay members of my own Roman Catholic Church and members of other churches and non-religious groups. I have felt my reputation has been unfairly and seriously attacked, and sadly enough, by a number of my fellow Roman Catholics who do not appear to understand precisely the separate roles of state authority and church authority, end quote. I feel the same way. I will vote aye because, number one, same-sex couples in Hawaii do not have the right to 1,138 federal benefits enjoyed by opposite-sex married couples. These benefits are now available because the U.S. Supreme Court determined in June that unequal treatment of married same-sex couples is unconstitutional. Number two, this bill provides for broad religious protection, leaving every church free to decide whether or not to marry same-sex couples. Far from trampling on religious freedom, the bill goes far beyond the requirements of the First Amendment, allowing religious institutions to choose who can use their facilities for weddings and receptions, even if they're in the business of making a profit. My decision to vote yes was ultimately determined by our nation's founding fathers, who wrote the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They agreed that a government for and by the people requires that no single church dictate the actions of the state. Instead, American leaders agreed that there must be a separation between church and state, with strong protections for religious freedom, a representative democracy, and a Bill of Rights to prevent the tyranny of the majority. Colleagues, U.S. Supreme Court cases interpreting the First and 14th Amendments for nearly 50 years have laid the foundation for us to be here today to vote on this bill. In 1967, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Loving v. Virginia that laws preventing marriages between persons on the basis of racial discrimination violated the equal protection and due process clauses of the 14th Amendment. The court ruled that the freedom to marry has long been recognized as one of the vital personal rights essential to the orderly pursuit of happiness by free men. Quote, marriage is one of the basic civil rights of many, fundamental to our very existence and survival. Under our Constitution, the freedom to marry or not marry a person of another race resides with the individual and cannot be infringed by the state, end quote. 20 years ago, in 1993, a lawsuit was filed against the state when it refused to grant a same-sex couple a valid marriage license. The Supreme Court ruled that, quote, no person shall be denied the equal protection of the laws, nor be denied the enjoyment of the person's civil rights, or be discriminated against in the exercise thereof because of race, religion, sex, or ancestry, end quote. The arguments we have been hearing on this bill are eerily similar to ones debated and litigated for over 20 years. For some people, there will never be enough discussion because they prefer the status quo. In response to the Hawaii Supreme Court decision, this legislature took up the issue
Will
in
someone yield to the
1997.
Representative? Looks like everybody want to get their full time. Yes, Representative Evans.
I'll yield 3 minutes.
Representative Evans will yield 3 minutes.
Thank you, Rep.
Please
Evans.
proceed. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you. House Bill 117, introduced in 1997 by you, Mr. Speaker. In its final form, your bill said, quote, the legislature further finds that the question of whether or not the state should issue marriage license to couples of the same sex is a fundamental policy issue to be decided by the elected representatives of the people, end quote. That is why we are here today. A mere 5 months ago, on June 26, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in U.S. v. Windsor that Section 3 of DOMA was unconstitutional. The court found that the avowed purpose and practical effect of the law was to make same-sex marriages second-class marriages. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Kennedy stated, quote, DOMA's principal effect is to identify a subset of state-sanctioned marriages and make them unequal. The principal purpose is to impose inequality. The differentiation demeans the couple whose moral and sexual choices the Constitution protects and whose relationship the state has sought to dignify. And it humiliates tens of thousands of children now being raised by same-sex couples, end quote. As a result, several federal agencies are changing their policies to comport with the Supreme Court ruling. For example, on August 9th, the Social Security Administration, Acting Commissioner Carol Colvin said, quote, I am pleased to announce that Social Security is now processing some retirement spouse claims for same-sex couples and paying benefits when they are due. The recent Supreme Court decision helps ensure that all Americans are treated fairly and equally with the dignity and respect they deserve, end quote. I also looked for wisdom from Hawaiian leaders, and I really want to thank Kuhio Lewis, Chair for the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. In urging us to support SB1, he said, quote, it is time for Hawaiians who have been silent for so long on this issue to raise our voices against the parasitic capitalization of our culture, history, language, and philosophy by those who continue to convolute and decimate us even beyond what has already been accomplished at the hands of the colonizers. Kanaka Maoli have been conditioned for so long to think and act like foreigners that we have allowed the meaning and intent of our words, traditions, and philosophies to be replaced by neo-Christian beliefs and used to further a Western political agenda on our islands, end quote. Mr. Speaker, it's critical to approach this issue with love and not hate. We should love all people, regardless of their religious views or their sexuality. Now is the time for us to heal as this discussion continues to move forward. And I want to just read a couple passages from a book that the woman I mentioned earlier from Laie, who is Mormon, has shared with me to help guide me in making my decision. The Lord uses the unlikely to accomplish the impossible. Try to speak your soul, heal your heart, unclutter your mind, lift your spirit, strengthen your resolve, energize, and invigorate you. Okay.
Sergeant at Arms, would you please?
10 seconds. 10 seconds. We need to seek truth. We need to speak truths to ourselves and others. We need to remember what we know to be true. We need to share what we know to be true with those we love. Let the truths you know and love connect you with the people you know and love. And with that, I would also like to ask to insert written comments in support.
So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Further discussion?
Mr.
Yes,
Speaker?
Representative
Matsumoto.
Matsumoto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Mr.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I stand in opposition to Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1. My vote in opposition is not because I don't believe in equal benefits. My vote in opposition is against this process. The other day, one of our colleagues made an insightful point, saying, and I quote, "We are unable to see past our own beliefs. We believe we are right, each of us, whether we are on this side or that side. And in a sense, we have gotten to the point where almost no information, no statements can change our beliefs." I completely agree with that statement. And I would argue, if we are in fact so stuck in our beliefs that we are unable to make an objective decision, then maybe the 76 members of this legislative body shouldn't be the only people voting on this monumental measure. If we can't see past our own beliefs, then perhaps the 700,000 registered voters in our state should have a say as well. And Mr. Speaker, as a young legislator, I do still believe in the process. In 2012, Washington State introduced similar legislation. The Senate passed it, the House passed it, and the governor signed it. But then the citizens of Washington gathered sufficient signatures to put it on the ballot, and they voted on it, and the people passed it. 54-46. What's significant is all sides were able to have ownership of that decision. Ownership of that decision. So whether or not they agreed on the outcome, they had all taken part in the process. Here we can get that same opportunity. The people of Hawaii can have ownership in the decision. And so my vote, Mr. Speaker, is not in opposition to equal benefits. My vote comes in opposition to the process. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much, Representative. Representative Lowen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In support?
Please proceed.
First of all, thank you so much to the staff for all the hard work, to all the members of this body, and especially to the many people who took the time to call, email, submit written testimony, and come to the Capitol to give testimony in person. I do regret there's not equal opportunity for my neighbor island constituents to participate in person. I've led an effort to bring greater access to government to the neighbor islands, and I will continue to work towards that. Nonetheless, I have heard from my community, from hundreds of constituents through emails, calls, social media, and more. I've heard from both those in support and in opposition to this bill, and I have tried to honor the concerns of all. With the amendments made in the House, many of which were specifically requested in testimony, this is a balanced bill and provides for both equal rights for all and protects the First Amendment rights of religious organizations at the same time. There are a few other things I have to say. After listening to over 50 hours of testimony, I was saddened by many of the hurtful and incorrect things that were said. It was indeed difficult to sit through. So here are a few things that I think need to be said. AIDS is not a consequence of being gay. It's a virus that affects over 35 million people worldwide, with almost 70% of cases occurring in Africa. Everyone is equally susceptible to this illness. Second, there is no homosexual lifestyle, just like there is no straight lifestyle. Within the LGBT community, there is the same diversity that can be found in society at large. All cultures, all religions, all nationalities, Democrats and Republicans, soccer moms, criminals, doctors, lawyers, and carpenters. The LGBT community are just people like all of us. I do not believe that being gay is a choice, and recent scientific studies, as we heard in testimony, support this. But I don't need a molecular biologist or a geneticist or any number of Harvard degrees to convince me. I respect that if someone tells me how they feel about themselves, that they are the experts on themselves. Regarding some of the incendiary claims that were made in testimony about how marriage equality will affect our education system, it is irresponsible to perpetuate these lies. This is fear-mongering at its worst and is a grave disservice to society. Finally, throughout this process, there have been many accusations of some of us having an agenda. And to that I say, there is no hidden agenda that I know of. Rather, there is a conscientious effort to promote equality, uphold our Constitution, and work towards a society based on mutual respect that tolerates differences and values diversity. And if that is my agenda, then I am proud of it. Thank you, Speaker. And with that, I would like permission to insert additional written comments into the journal.
So ordered, Representative.
Speaker.
Thank you very much, and Representative Ward.
Speaker, I rise in opposition.
Please proceed.
Speaker, I'd like to make two categorical comments with different points under each of those. The first is the process. The process of being here is flawed. You didn't want to come in a special session. The Senate didn't want to come in a special session, but here we are because of the governor, and the governor I don't believe is with us any longer. But we did not come here at our own will. In fact, the surveys indicated that 70% of the people said this issue belongs to them, not to us. And we haven't heard the last of that. Another part of the process that I think is flawed, Mr. Speaker, is I don't believe we acted in good faith in all of the great things that we're patting ourselves on the back after these 55 hours. Remember that your chairs tried to shut down the hearing by going all night on Thursday night. Fortunately, you, Speaker, saved us by telling your chairs, don't burn out the members and don't burn out the public by going against what the majority press release said, that if there are people still in line by midnight Thursday night, they will be allowed to testify the next day. Thank you for keeping your word, but no, Mr. Speaker, we could have been shut down the first night of the hearing. Fortunately, we go on for 55 hours. They thereafter kept their word, and I'm very grateful for that, because everybody who had a chance to speak spoke, and that is very, very good. Mr. Speaker, I won't mention some of the more superficial things like people getting permission to go shishi. The other day, we captured them in here. We wouldn't let them out unless they gave a driver's license. That was undemocratic. Shutting down debate today, Mr. Speaker, was undemocratic. You know, the rush to make sure that these amendments didn't do stuff. You guys spent more time in your caucus with recess than we spent out here on debate when we were starting going. Mr. Speaker, what's the value here when we've got the people of Hawaii wanting to hear what we said, and they're not hearing it? Which reminds me to remind you that the 11 hours of debate, which has burned out a few of my colleagues, none of the people heard that, Mr. Speaker, because of decisions that were made, and I have no reason what the motivations were, that we did 5 days of television and then we went dark. 5 days to hear the people, and then one day they didn't hear their representatives. They didn't hear their representatives. Mr. Speaker, that was not fair. That was as bad as some of the House rules that you pulled out today and shut the debate down. Okay, that's enough about the process. Let's go to the bill. I put in 3 amendments because, number one, the churches are vicariously protected. They have a shield around them, but not with really inability to be pierced. That's why the amendment was, and as the good Representative Kapolei said, we need to make sure it's very clear about this public accommodations, because given what the Attorney General said and the Civil Rights Commission, the penetration of that in lawsuits are going to be numerous. And Mr. Speaker, another part of the lawsuits is where a TRO was filed against some of the church leaders, Wayne Cadero, Elwin Ahu, because of the people who are out here. So if we think we've created unity between the communities, even while we're doing the democratic process, a TRO was filed to shut down the people who are out there probably singing and shouting. Mr. Speaker, that's not good. The second part of the problem with the bill is the protection for those who are small businesses, the protection of those who have conscience, the protection of those who want to do commerce at the same time remain true to their beliefs. This bill is entirely devoid of any of that. Thirdly, and I'm going to go back to the mama bear syndrome, the women of Hawaii, the mothers of Hawaii have said, leave our keiki alone, leave our keiki out of this. And Mr. Speaker, I gave you a touch of the Pono curriculum that I showed that there were slight sentiments that were leading towards teaching of the homosexual lifestyle in our curriculum now, even before same-sex marriage is passed. Subsequent to that, Mr. Speaker, there is even more indications that same-sex, what's the best word to say? The same-sex activities and how they are done are already in the curriculum in some places and are going to be obviously discussed in the coming days. So, Mr. Speaker, these things about fearing that this, I think one of my colleagues said very derogatorily, perpetuating lies. Mr. Speaker, we don't have to go to Massachusetts, we don't have to go to Canada, we don't have to go to the moon to prove it's there. The curriculum revolution follows same-sex marriage. That's a corollary. That's the reality of it. Mr. Speaker, the point is, we keep our eyes open to what is about to happen. My fear is the conflict between the two communities is going to be resolved in the courts.
Mr. Speaker, his time is up.
We are not here to make money for the lawyers.
Mr. Speaker, his time is up.
My time is up, and I thank you for the gratuitous remarks to make sure that I say, lastly, Mr. Speaker, let the people decide, because if they don't, they're going to decide who's here.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Lee and then Onishi, okay?
Thank you. Can I ask to insert written comments in support?
Sure.
You know, Mr. Speaker, it has been 20 years since Hawaii's Supreme Court ruled that denying marriage to same-sex couples violated our Constitution. For those families, it has been 20 years fighting discrimination to earn the same respect as everyone else. Testifying here the other day was a family of 2 women and their 16-year-old daughter. And I asked them, how could they live in a community that rejects them and sit through 5 days of people testifying loudly and repeatedly that they aren't a real family, that their love isn't real, that they are evil, that they're an abomination, and they have no place here in Hawaii. They said for them, that hearing was horrific, but we endured because we love our daughter, and our daughter loves us. And we still have hope that one day she will grow up in a Hawaii that is better than this, where she won't face discrimination because her family is different than others. Mr. Speaker, this bill is our chance to fulfill that dream of a better future and help end an era of discrimination that is hurting countless families here in Hawaii. Make no mistake, this is a hard issue, but we are elected to make hard decisions and do the right thing knowing that we're not going to make everybody happy, and not everyone will approve. When interracial marriage was legalized, just 20% of the public approved of such relationships. 20%. But I wonder how people back then explained to their grandchildren today that opposing interracial marriage was the right thing to do. What we do here today is not game-changing. It is not precedent-setting. It is not extraordinary. It is but one page in the greatest tradition in American history, the sacred obligation of each succeeding generation to extend basic rights, liberties, and freedom to those previously denied them, and live up to the promise of freedom and equality this nation made at its inception. From women's suffrage, racial equality, and interracial marriage are now commonplace, but each was seen as unacceptable, controversial, and even immoral in recent history. These social evolutions were not easy, and it is unfortunate that the great march toward justice and equality often divides before it unites, but pursuing freedom for all has been the right thing to do every time. And our society has healed, and together we have grown stronger. It's time we move forward once more. Attitudes are changing. And I know the day will soon come when same-sex families are seen as equals, because people aren't born discriminating against them. People are taught to discriminate against them. And those lessons are slowly disappearing with each passing generation as more people begin to recognize that they have sons and daughters, friends and neighbors who are gay, but who are regular people with hopes and dreams and who have families just like us. The truth, Mr. Speaker, is that the rest of us have little to fear because same-sex families have always lived in our society and will continue to live here whether we pass this bill or not. They will continue to have relationships whether we pass this bill or not, and they will continue to raise children whether we pass this bill or not. But here we have a sacred obligation to see that everyone is treated equally and fairly under the laws of this great state where it is self-evident that we are all created equal, endowed by our Creator with the unalienable right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And I don't know anyone who can find happiness while being discriminated against because of the person they love. I believe we are bound by the oaths we took to uphold the spirit of our Constitution, to pass this bill to ensure equality for all. But even if we were not, and I did not know how I was going to vote as an elected leader, I choose to err on the side of fairness. As the voice of the people, I choose to err on the side of freedom. And as a son of these islands, I choose to err on the side of aloha. And as a human being, I choose to err on the side of love. I want my children to grow up in a place where they will be treated the same as everyone else, whether they look Japanese or Hawaiian, whether they are straight or gay. Who they fall in love with and marry should be up to them and no one else. We can no longer allow the rights of one minority to be ignored. We should know better. In Hawaii, we are all minorities, and we all deserve the same dignity and respect. Mr. Speaker, someday I am going to be the one answering to my grandchildren. And when they ask, I want to tell them that I did the right thing. I vote yes.
Thank you very much. Representative
Mr. Speaker.
Onishi. Representative Onishi and then Takumi. I'm very sorry. You'll be right after Takumi. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to thank everyone who have participated in this process on this issue. This was a serious issue, and I thank my colleagues for the respect they gave to those that participated in this, from the public. Mr. Speaker, being from Hawaii Island and representing a district that stretches from South Hilo to Honoapu and Kau, a district of over 50 miles long, it is very difficult for my constituents to communicate with me in person. But they have found other ways to express their thoughts, via telephone calls and messages, through emails and personal letters. I have met with individuals, leaders and representatives of organizations on both sides of the issue on this bill, on Hawaii Island and here at the Capitol. I have received hundreds and probably thousands of contacts from individuals and representatives of organizations from my district and Hawaii Island over the last 5 months from when this discussion began on whether or not to hold a special session to today over Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1. I believe clearly that the constituents of my district have been innovative and capable of communicating with me during this special session, as they have been able to do during our regular session. Mr. Speaker, I've been able to hear their concerns, and I've also been able to share my thoughts as well. I have shared that for me, this issue is for equality. During my childhood, my focus was all about me and my needs. But as the oldest child, great responsibility and accountability was placed upon me without asking me, to take care and ensure that my younger sister, brothers, cousins, and our friends were safe, behaved, and were protected by me. I accepted that responsibility and accountability, although I didn't feel that it was fair to me, because that was the way things were done for centuries in my Japanese culture. Was that fair? With that experience, I didn't put that responsibility on my oldest daughter over her sisters. It was my responsibility to treat each of them equally. That was an action of equality. Mr. Speaker, as an adult, I was very active in the JCs, as I know you have been. When I joined the JCs, it was only for men, no women allowed. When we were challenged in the 90s for not allowing and accepting women to join our organization, I supported the decision to change decades of past practice and allow and accept women into the JCs. That was an action of equality. Mr. Speaker, when I joined the County of Hawaii as an employee, I got involved with my union, the Hawaii Government Employees Association. I became a leader on Hawaii Island and later at the state level as a director and eventually as president of the HGA. During my involvement, we faced many issues of inequality and unequal treatment of government employees, and we fought back to correct those inequities in the workplace, the practices within departments and agencies, promotion and hiring practices, and many, many more issues. We fought for equal pay for equal work and the protection of benefits promised to current workers and especially our retired government workers. That were actions of equality. Mr. Speaker, taking into account all of the input that I and we have received and reviewed on the merits of this issue, today I stand in support of equality. Equality for the rights and benefits for same-sex couples that want the right to marry. And I also stand in support for protections of religious organizations, their associated organizations, their facilities, and all of their clergy, staff, and volunteers. I believe these are the issues that have risen, to the top. And
Mr.
we
Speaker,
have
I yield my time.
And we have received input, discussion, and debate over Senate Draft 1, HD1, and it accomplishes both. To accomplish this, we must pass this now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. Yes, Representative Takumi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In support.
Please proceed.
First off, I'd like to have written remarks into the journal, if possible.
So ordered.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't going to say anything. I didn't speak on second reading. And in fact, when the Civil Unions Bill passed a few years ago, I only entered written remarks because I always felt at this point everything that has to be said has been said. But as I was sitting on the floor today, it hit me that there are only 6 members that served in this chamber, including yourself, Mr. Speaker, that were here in 1993 when the Bear v. Lewin decision was rendered. And so with your indulgence, I'd just like to share a personal perspective and bring this full circle for me. You know, as I listened to the testimonies and read the emails that came in, I was reminded how similar this issue is to another one in our nation's history. The representative from House District 48 has alluded to it, and begging your indulgence, I'd like to draw the comparisons between that case and the measure before us today. But in order to do so, Mr. Speaker, it's critically important to remember how America was in the 1950s. Jim Crow laws, schools, restrooms, and even drinking fountains were segregated. And all of this was legal because of the Plessy v. Ferguson case in 1896 that the Supreme Court said separate but equal was not discriminatory. But Mr. Speaker, we now know that America at that time was not a society built upon a separate but equal principle, but a society built upon a separate but unequal reality. As all this was happening in the small town of Central Point, Virginia, little did an 18-year-old black woman and a 23-year-old white man knew that they were about to make history. Why? Because Mildred Jeter and Richard Loving committed a crime under the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia. You see, Mr. Speaker, they committed the crime of falling in love and getting married. Interracial marriage was illegal in Virginia and almost half the states in the country. So in June of 1958, the couple drove to Washington, D.C., got married, and returned home. Mr. Speaker, this is no different than some of the comments I hear that why don't gays go to another state and get married and come back to this state? A few weeks after returning to Virginia, and based on an anonymous tip, the police raided their home early in the morning, hoping to catch them having sex, which was illegal in Virginia. They were rousted from their bed, handcuffed, and taken to jail. On January 6, 1959, the Lovings pled guilty and were sentenced to 1 year in prison. But the judge suspended the sentence for 25 years on the condition that they don't return to Virginia for those 25 years. And so they moved to the District of Columbia. You know, Mr. Speaker, in rendering the verdict, Judge Leon Bazell said, and I quote, "Almighty God created the races, and he placed them on separate continents. And but for the interference with his arrangement, there will be no cause for such marriages. The fact that he separated the races shows that he did not intend for the races to mix." Unquote. You know, surely the judge was merely echoing the sentiments of his time. that had a sincere religious belief that God did not intend for races to intermarry. Now, over 50 years later, I would hope that most of us will say that their belief at that time, however sincere, was simply wrong. A Gallup poll taken in 1958 asked, do you approve or disapprove of marriages between white and colored people? That was a term. Only 4% of the American people approved. Obviously, if we had let the people vote in 1958 whether or not interracial marriage should be legal, 96% of the American people would have voted no, because they thought such marriages were not normal, and the children of such marriages would suffer greatly. In subsequent Gallup polls, Mr. Speaker, it was only until 1983 that more Americans approved than disapproved of interracial marriage. In other words, the Lovings would have had to wait 25 years before public and popular opinion gave them the right to get married. The case went through the judicial system, and on June 12, 1967, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled that Virginia's law was unconstitutional. And with that decision, laws against interracial marriage that still existed in 16 states was also deemed unconstitutional. You know, in reading the history of this case, what struck me was Richard Loving's reason for initiating the lawsuit. Mr. and Mrs. Loving were simple people. He was a construction worker by trade. They were not rabble-rousers. They were not militants. They were not activists. When asked what he wanted the Supreme Court justices to know, he replied, "Tell the court I love my wife, and it's just unfair that I can't live with her in Virginia."
Mr. Speaker, I yield my time.
Sorted.
Now I know some will say that this was about marriage between a man and a woman, and the measure before us today is different. Perhaps. But I will assert that the same concerns that were raised in the Loving case are being raised today. Let me conclude with a personal story, Mr. Speaker. A story not about constitutional amendments, First Amendment rights, immunity from liability, and all the rest of the nuances and subtleties that we've been discussing for the past few weeks. Some of you may know that we are blessed with 5 grandchildren in our family. One of them, Kayla, is a 4th grader at Momilani Elementary School. Yesterday morning, I took her to school, and as she was getting ready, she asked if I voted yes on the bill. I was surprised she asked me this because, like most 9-year-olds, she usually asks me about going to Chuck E. Cheese and not about contentious social issues. I told her that I did vote yes, and she said she heard the vote was 30-18 in favor of the bill. I asked her how she knew this, and she said she heard it on the news. So, you know, Mr. Speaker, as the chair of your education committee, as I was driving her to school, I thought to myself, well, maybe this is a teachable moment, the kind of moments that you wait for, that you can talk to your children and your grandchildren, and perhaps they can learn something. And little did I know, Mr. Speaker, that I would be the student and Kayla the teacher. I asked her if she thought it was okay if gays got married. And she replied, if they love each other. I said, really? And she looked at me and said, Grandpa, love is love. Love is love. It's pretty simple. Kayla gets it, Mr. Speaker. It's time that we get it too. And there's no better time than today, no better time than now. I vote yes.
Thank you very much, Representative. Yes, Representative Justin Woodson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very brief comments, if I may, in opposition, respectfully.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you again. Of course, we should afford equal rights to everyone, Mr. Speaker, within reason. That, I think, goes without saying. But, Speaker, we should not be in the business of legislating any religious document to do so. For there are ways in which we can go about pertaining the goals of this bill without being so divisive. Mr. Speaker, it has been said that some of us legislators have said harmful things about the homosexual community. And I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that that assertion is inaccurate, at least as far as public record goes. For to do so, Mr. Speakful, is harmful. It cuts off thought processes. It divides us. It does not bring us together. Mr. Speaker, if a bill potentially induces a flood of litigation, then it is divisive. It does not bring us together. If a bill puts one side against another, Speaker, it's divisive. It does not bring us together. So here we are, Mr. Speaker, in the second week, practicing democracy in all of its messy glory and splendor. But this end product, Mr. Speaker, divides us. It does not bring us together. It does not bring a consensus of the majority on both sides of this issue. And for that reason, Mr. Speaker, and others, respectfully, I am voting no to this measure. Thank you.
All right, Representative, thank you very much. Representative Thielen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm rising in support of the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the majority of the members in this body for allowing me to continue to serve on the Judiciary Committee. I thank you very much for that. I listened to the 57 hours of testimony. I've read and responded to thousands of emails on both sides of the issue, and I want to quote from one email from a young person, and I quote, "I just did something spontaneous. So I was on the bus on my way home when we passed the state capitol, which was bombarded by picketers of the marriage bill. I was shocked. It made me sad to see how many people are against equal rights. I honestly don't get it. It bothered me so much I actually got off the bus, called my mom to tell her what was going on, and walked all the way back to the state capitol, 3 bus stops back. There was no question in my mind that I had to go and support my cause for equality. I walked through the crowds of traditional marriage supporters and looked for my same-sex people. It took a while, but finally I spotted a little rainbow and followed it. At the end of the rainbow, I met a woman with a sign that read, 'Love is love.' And I found out that the rainbow I was chasing was a lightsaber that belonged to her young son. I tapped her on the shoulder and asked if she was on the other side, and she said yes. I smiled and I said, 'I'm sorry, I have to give you a hug.' I thought it was very brave of her to be taking a stand among all these people who were fighting to keep her from sharing the same rights they've had since the beginning of time. Seeing her little boy made me think about my mom and all she's had to go through because of her orientation, and that I've had to go through being a child of a gay parent. I've had people in person say all kinds of stuff to me about this subject. You're going to hell. Your mom's going to hell. So growing up and seeing that kind of hatred was not easy, but it taught me something. It taught me that I don't want to be hateful. Having been raised by a gay mom, I've learned to be a more loving and accepting person. And then, Mr. Speaker, this young person concludes, change needed to happen. Let's face it, times have changed. You're denying marriage equality for same-sex couples is denying the rights of love. And you never know who you're affecting. Perhaps the closest person to you is gay, but they just haven't told you yet. They could be your child, your sibling, your parent, your best friend. Do you really want to deny them their rights, deny them their happiness? Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't, and so I'm standing in support of Senate Bill 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Representative. Yes, Representative Kawakami.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in support.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, we have engaged in a debate of what seems at the surface a myriad of topics in dealing with the definition of marriage. Who does it belong to? And at the base, the debate has brought about two sides of our community. One that holds deeply that marriage is the ultimate expression of love between one man and one woman. And on the other side is the belief that it is a civil marriage, one that has equal rights for people to have the same benefits as every married couple in our state and nation. But both, Speaker, are really about love. Love is what this is all about. And the foundation of my support for this bill has and always been about freedom. The ability to recognize that marriage is a legal relationship and a religious relationship. And under the First Amendment, we must protect these freedoms so that one religious belief is not imposed on another's. We here are tasked with balancing all of this, fully recognizing that there are many different religions, and even amongst some of these, there are varying degrees of tolerance that may not be accepted by all. But nonetheless, must recognize the vast diversity of different religious beliefs, whereas tolerance is limited to execute the protection of freedom for any individual in our country. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to go back and recite some words that I offered this body during my invocation when I was appointed to the House. You see, Mr. Speaker, my mom taught me 5 things that I try to live by every day. And of course, I'm not always successful, but it serves as a part of my moral compass that guides my decision making. The first thing she taught me was to always say thank you. So I want to thank everybody for being a part of this process. The second thing she taught me was to never judge, that only God could judge. Number 3 was to always forgive. This is often the hardest thing to do, but holding in animosity is like slowly poisoning yourself. 4 was to always leave a place or person in a better state than what you found them in. And 5th, and most importantly to me, is that there is only one time when it's okay to look down on somebody. There's only one time when it's okay to look down on somebody, and it's when you're standing over them, picking them up off the ground after they've fallen. Mr. Speaker, now after today, now more than ever, we're going to have to work hard and start picking people off the ground. A lot of people on both sides of this issue have been hurt, and our task as a community is to start the healing process. And I truly believe that through tough times, it can spur the beginning of healing. Mr. Speaker, when Kauai went through Hurricane Iniki, our island was devastated. But what was revealed was not the destruction. It was the creation of a bond between neighbors and strangers, friends and enemies, families all coming together to fix things, to rebuild, to heal. And through adversity, unity was born. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Representative Kawakami. Representative Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support.
Please proceed.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Governor Neil Abercrombie for calling this special session. Our governor understands and recognizes the importance of religious freedoms and the importance of equality under the law. The governor also recognized that a special session would allow us to focus on a very important subject that, if processed during regular session, would be very disruptive to thousands of bills that require our full attention beginning in January. Mr. Speaker, regarding process, the House committee took the time to listen and process this piece of legislation. And rarely do I have the time to focus on and study a piece of legislation months in advance of a hearing. Rarely do I have the time to write the governor and the House leadership about my concerns regarding this legislation. Rarely do I have the time to meet with the Judiciary Chair to discuss my concerns in detail. Mr. Speaker, I had the time to do all that. Mr. Speaker, I was elected to make decisions to the best of my ability. I do not make decisions based upon a popularity contest or who screams the loudest. I'm always faced with opposition on every piece of legislation. I will never make everyone happy. SB1 HD1 provides for marriage equality for all while ensuring that religious freedoms are granted to the many diverse belief systems embraced here in our state. Mr. Speaker, marriage equality policy in SB1 HD1 is good legislation that makes Hawaii a better place for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Representative. Yes, Representative Ng.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of Senate Bill 1 relating to equal rights.
Please proceed.
Thank you. A couple days ago, I spoke to young mainstream Christians. Today, I have a broader message. In 1998, my parents voted on a constitutional amendment to reserve marriage between one woman and one man. I remember the commercials. Vote yes for traditional marriage. Our family liked that one. And vote no on the constitutional amendment. That one was bad. You see, like most 9-year-olds, morality was a very black and white concept. There's right, and then there's wrong. I carried a due north, due south moral compass oriented primarily on what my incredibly loving parents, hi mom, taught me. And they, along with my church, taught me that being gay was bad. But in October 1998, a few weeks before that vote, something happened that shook and recalibrated my young conscience. Matthew Shepard, a gay teenager going to college in Wyoming, was inhumanely tortured and murdered by straight classmates. A hate crime that made national news. He was tied to a fence and beat with a pistol and left to bleed to death. I remember discussing this with a friend of mine from church, and my friend said, "Good for him. God says he is evil." But I knew in my young heart that no one deserved this kind of brutality. No one. This is where my convictions began. You see, if we want to understand this or any gay rights issue, we need to understand the LGBT experience. Many of us just can't grasp what it'll be like. Until college, like many of the testifiers here, I thought being gay was a lifestyle choice that went against nature. But when you actually hear from the LGBT community, as we on your joint committee on finance and Judd have witnessed, it is clearly not a choice. In fact, many gay people who testified last week proclaimed that as teenagers, they fought who they are and tried to force themselves straight. Many face self-loathing and torment because of this, and thank God that unlike the thousands of gay teenagers that take their own lives every year, these brave people persevered, and they were able to be here today in front of a less than friendly crowd to stand up like champions for equal rights for all. For those opponents who say this isn't about civil rights, I challenge you to tell that with a clear conscience to Alan Spector, who had the love of his life deported back to South America because his postdoctoral research funding expired. I challenge you to tell that to Kimberly Allen, who was not allowed to see her life partner in the hospital during the last hours of her life. I challenge you to tell that to Tambra Young, who had to reconsider adoption and delay forming the family she desired because of the cost without the rights and benefits of marriage. Tell that to Bart Zowell, a soldier fighting for his freedom who was called a flaming homo mistake by a rank-and-file superior. Tell that to Jeremy Wright, who slipped into depression trying to force or pray himself straight. And I challenge you to tell that to the parents of Matthew Shepard, that the suffering and the tragic death of their own son that they experienced is not sufficient to call this a civil rights issue. Tell these people, hold on until the majority is ready. Tell them they must continue to suffer inequality and hate because other people are not ready to grant them full equality. Can you do that with a clear conscience? Some testifiers have spoken about this bill ushering in an onslaught of gay lifestyle. And they challenged your committee members, Mr. Speaker. Would you wish homosexuality upon your own kids? So I really thought about this. If the gay lifestyle they speak of pertains to the highly successful physicians, attorneys, economists, a world-renowned microbiologists and psychologists that we've seen testify, if this gay lifestyle pertains to the inspiringly committed couples who have been together for decades yet are still viewed as strangers in the eyes of their government, if this gay lifestyle that they're referring to pertains to these brave people boldly standing in the face of hate to fight for equal rights for all, if that's what the gay agenda will bring, if that's how my gay children will be like, then hey, sign me up. I'll take 3. And please, don't write scripts for your kids to tell me that children need a mother and a father in order to be raised right. When my father passed away when I was a young child, and just like our junior U.S. Senator, and just like our Hawaii-born President of the United States, I come from a single-parent home. Don't tell me that I and my brothers and sisters who are excelling in sports, academics, and art, that we are any lesser than your child.
Mr. Speaker, I yield my time.
Especially in Hawaii, where Hanai adoption is enshrined in tradition, where multi-generational families are valued just as much as our kupuna are, and where diversity is the hallmark of our aloha spirit, we need to embrace empirical evidence stating that the nuclear family is no better off than other familial structures. Our children need to continue to learn that in Hawaii, we're all equal, no matter your sexual orientation, and no matter how your family is structured. You see, I live in Kihei, with one of the largest gay populations in the state, and with the majority of my constituents in support. But for my colleagues who have the majority in their districts in opposition, let me leave you with this. In high school, my friends, just like most kids in high school, we used gay, the word gay, kind of as an insult, or as a great philosopher Macklemore said, as synonymous with the lesser. We hurled it at each other as to make fun of each other. And one day, a gay classmate of mine, he was walking to band class. He tripped and he dropped a glass jar that was full of paper stars. They're colorful stars. And my friend started laughing at him. Now, I felt bad. So I went over there and helped him. And that didn't make me really cool. As a matter of fact, every time we walked by that guy later on, my friends would say, hey, there goes your boyfriend. But I did it not because it was the popular thing to do, but because it was the right thing to do. Standing up for this individual did not make me popular, but it was the right thing to do. Just because the numerical majority is in one place, it does not mean they're in the right place. We are in a position right now that we must lead our state to the right place. Sometimes the right thing to do goes against the popular thing to do. While I cannot take my parents' 1998 vote back, the people placed me in a position where I can help correct an injustice here in Hawaii. And I am prepared to face the consequences of my vote. I have, to me, this bill is about love and acceptance. In Hawaii, we call it aloha. One person in the audience stated that it's the wrong love. I don't agree. Again, I agree with Macklemore. It's the same love. I have one last question. How many more gay people must God create until we realize that He wants them here? How many more gay people must God create until we realize that He wants them here? Mr. Speaker, let the people decide who they marry.
Thank you very much, Representative. Yes, Representative Rhodes, please. Since you didn't give a very lengthy speech in the beginning, so now maybe you can proceed.
Thank
okay,
you,
Representative
Mr. Speaker.
Rhodes.
In support.
Yes,
Yeah,
please proceed.
As I was thinking about what to say here near the end of the debate on legalizing same-sex marriage, I was thinking back on the civil union debate and of the many eloquent speeches that we heard back in 2010. Of all the speeches made during that debate, I've always liked the one that former Representative Barbara Morimoto made best. Because I didn't think I could do better myself. I called her yesterday to see if she wouldn't mind if I quoted her. She called back today and graciously agreed to allow me to do so, with a couple of caveats. One, she wasn't talking about marriage in the civil unions debate, and unfortunately, her life mate that she mentions in the statement passed away after she made this statement. But I still like it very much, and I'm going to read it. It's not very long. I think all of us, all Americans, believe in the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And to me, happiness is defined by a loving family and a faithful life partner, and I'm blessed with both. Sad is the person who has none of these. We would have a more contented populace and a better world if everyone had a large family, or at least someone. I don't believe our society will come crashing down if we pass this bill. It hasn't in Canada and Mexico and Spain and other jurisdictions. Nothing is dearer to me and to many of you here than our family values. And because I believe we are all God's little children, for this reason I vote to enact civil unions. For this reason, I vote yes on this bill and request permission to insert additional comments.
So ordered, and thank you very much. Yes, Representative Owana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Should I offend anyone during my speech, I apologize in advance. My intent, although inadvertent, is not to offend, but to simply share my point of view through the eyes of the overwhelming amount of testimony in opposition to this measure. Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1, continues to be one of concern. On page 1 of the bill, it states that the federal government does not recognize civil unions and same-sex couples will not be recognized by the federal law. Why are we having this conversation at the state level? This issue should be taken up at the federal level, Mr. Speaker. We provide rights to civil union couples and those with reciprocal benefits at the state level. Civil unions and reciprocal benefits was the great compromise just a few years ago in 2011. We were told that if we provide these options, the GLBT community, they would be satisfied. Have the people of Hawaii not done enough? We gave you your civil unions. We gave you your reciprocal benefits. We don't have signs that say straight people only. We don't have signs that say GLBT to the rear of the bus. And we don't have separate water fountains for GLBT individuals. Have we not already shared our aloha spirit with you, our customs, our culture? Religious rights will be compromised, and I will go over that later. But our keiki, our children, our future, now in our public school system, it's happening in Hawaii, Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier. And it's happened in Canada, where the same-sex marriage is legal. It's happened in the mainland, where the same-sex marriage is legal. And now it's in our public school system as we stand here to debate this bill. It's masking itself as, quote unquote, culturally responsive teen pregnancy and STI prevention program. And guess who created this program? Our very own University of Hawaii at Manoa Center on Disability Studies. Guess who their partners are? Alulike, Berkeley Policy Associates, Hawaii Department of Education, Planned Parenthood of Hawaii. And guess where it's currently being taught? On all major islands throughout the state. The Department of Education did not provide testimony at the House joint hearings. They're already implementing the programs to indoctrinate our children into believing that homosexual relations are normal and healthy, and heterosexual relationships are abnormal and unhealthy. A concerned parent brought this information to our attention. He attended a parents' meeting introducing a new sex education curriculum for 7th graders being piloted at the university. He and many other parents were alarmed. It not only teaches hands-on experience on putting a condom on or something, but also teaching how to have homosexual sex, including oral and anal sex. alluding to the fact that it may even be better than heterosexual sex because you don't have to worry about getting pregnant. The module also includes discussions about relationships, and 3 scenarios were given. The 2 heterosexual scenarios were negative, while the homosexual scenario was painted to be very peaceful and positive. When the parents questioned the presenters why this curriculum promotes homosexual sex as better than heterosexual sex, the answer was, because that is how the UH wrote it. The department, let me see here. Another point, Mr. Speaker, many have made claims that same-sex marriage is a civil right. I believe the people of Hawaii compromised with the same-sex marriage issue back in 2011 when we passed the Civil Unions Bill. Testimony during that time, in order for the bill's passage, claimed that the GLBT community would stop at civil unions. I did not support civil unions at that time, Mr. Speaker, because I knew this was a slippery slope, which would be a nightmare of a bill that we are looking at today in Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1. An article by then doctoral student in financial economics, Adam Kolininsky from MIT, wrote the following, and I'll just read a few passages. The debate over whether the state ought to recognize gay marriages has thus far focused on the issues as one of civil rights. Such a treatment is erroneous because the state recognition of marriage is not a universal right. States regulate marriage in many ways besides denying men the right to marry men and women the right to marry women. Roughly half of all states prohibit first cousins from marrying, and all prohibit marriage of closer blood relatives, even if the individuals being married are sterile. In all states, it is illegal to attempt to marry more than one group.
All right, there is time has elapsed for you. Does someone want to contribute their time?
Thank
Mr.
you.
Speaker, I yield my time.
Shorter.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Roughly half of all states prohibit first cousins from marrying, and all prohibit marriage of closer blood relatives, even if the individuals being married are sterile. In all states, it is illegal to attempt to marry more than one person or even to pass off more than one person as one spouse. Some states restrict the marriage of couples of people suffering from syphilis or other venereal diseases. Homosexuals, therefore, are not the only people to be denied the right to marry the person of their choosing. I do not claim that all of these other types of couples restricted from marrying are equivalent to homosexual couples. I only bring them up to illustrate that marriage is heavily regulated, and for good reason. When a state recognizes a marriage, it bestows upon the couple certain benefits which are costly to both the state and other individuals. Collecting a deceased spouse's Social Security, claiming an extra tax exemption for a spouse, and having the right to be covered under a spouse's health insurance policy are just a few examples of the costly benefits associated with marriage. In a sense, a married couple receives a subsidy. Why? Because a marriage between two unrelated heterosexuals is likely to result in a family with children, and propagation of society is a compelling state interest. For this reason, states have, in varying degrees, restricted from marriage couples unlikely to produce children. And perhaps it may serve a state's interest to recognize gay marriages to make it easier for gay couples to adopt. However, there is ample evidence, if you see David Popenoy's Life Without Father, that children need both male and female parents for proper development. Unfortunately, small sample sizes for other methodological problems make it impossible to draw conclusions from studies that directly examine the effects of gay parenting. However, empirically verified common wisdom about the importance of a mother and a father in a child's development should give advocates of gay adoption pause. The differences between men and women extend beyond anatomy, so it is essential for a child to be nurtured by parents of both sexes if a child is to learn to function in a society made up of both sexes. It is wise to have a social policy that encourages family arrangements that deny children such essentials. Gays are not necessarily bad parents, nor will they necessarily make their children gay, but they cannot provide a set of parents that includes both male and female. The language in relation to accommodations can still be misinterpreted, Mr. Speaker. Few religious organizations have the fund to defend themselves in lengthy lawsuits. The passage of this bill is a lawyer's retirement plan. I can only imagine how many lawsuits will be filed against religious organizations and those of faith. It is already happening here in Hawaii. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, I believe we as legislators are bound to those that we represent. I've sent out surveys and 78% in my district are in opposition to anything relating to same-sex marriage. We all have friends and family members who are of the GLBT persuasion, myself included, and my vote is a conduit for my constituents, and this vote will not stop me from giving my aloha to the GLBT community, the same way that I have in the past. I am appalled at how this measure has come before us, the dreadful language that is being used in this bill, and the divisiveness that was caused by the people behind this special session. To the GLBT community, I commit the resources of my office to find a solution. I will work tirelessly to establish equal rights for you so that you may have the respect, dignity, and acceptance you deserve. By use of an executive order or proclamation, the President may establish policy that grants federal recognition to civil unions enacted in the states that allow them and which directs executive branches to implement the directive immediately. Unfortunately, this fight is not at the state level, Mr. Speaker, it's at the federal level. Political parties are divided, we're divided in the chamber, and so are the people of Hawaii. I want Hawaii to be preserved as a Hawaii we have known. People save all of their life savings to come here and experience our Hawaii. They want to experience the Hawaiian people. That is what makes us special to anywhere in the world, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, let's not make this huge mistake that we cannot take back.
Time is up.
It's just 10 more seconds, please. Generations will have to endure and only wonder how it all came about. Should this bill pass, Mr. Speaker, as a native Hawaiian born and raised in the islands, I will feel like a stranger in my own homeland. The process and the language in this bill is not pono. And for the future of Hawaii and the future of the Hawaiian Kingdom that continues to lie dormant, Mr. Speaker, I vote in opposition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Representative Mizuno, Vice Speaker Mizuno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this measure with reservations.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will not focus my speech on reservations, but I ask that the journal be open that I can submit written comments on my concerns with this bill.
So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I was elected to the House of Representatives, I swore a solemn oath to protect, serve, and represent the people of Hawaii. While there are many voices and strong differences that have polarized the same-sex marriage issue, my role as a representative has never been more clear or my mission more passionate. I protect, I represent, I serve to ensure that all people of Hawaii are free to exercise their right to freedom of religion, as well as their ability to live a lifestyle of their own choosing. Mr. Speaker, the struggle before us as legislators during this special session is to do our utmost to ensure the rights of both sides. Both sides, Mr. Speaker, were protected and honored. Mr. Speaker, I believe this measure protects the free will and choice of those wishing to love, honor, and commit their life in marriage to another, regardless of sex. Just as important is my belief in the freedom of religion. We have an equal amount of determination and passion to protect the churches, the mosques, the synagogues, and other places of worship, and those that lead them with exemptions and protections that ensure that their constitutional right to freedom of religion is protected. Through robust protection and exemption language within the new law, exempting and protecting these religious entities and their leaders from having to conduct services or open their religious facilities against their will to those practices that are not congruent with the faith and practices of these churches, mosques, synagogues, or other places of worship is vital to ensuring that all people, faiths, and lifestyles are protected. Our amendments ensure that no church in the state of Hawaii will be forced to perform a marriage or celebration of marriage that is against their sincere religious belief. As a representative, I cannot side with either group if they take aim to take away the rights of the other. What I can do, what I swore an oath to do, is to protect and represent the rights for all. In this special session, Mr. Speaker, it's been an honor to serve with you.
Thank you.
It's been an honor to serve with our members. I believe that our colleagues, regardless of their vote on this measure, truly worked to represent, honor, and fight for and serve the rights for all. Mr. Speaker, as you know, back in 2010, you and I voted no on House Bill 444. It's a civil unions bill that we all know that then Governor Lingo vetoed. After my no vote, I was called a hater and a bigot. I was a little perplexed because I'm not a hater or a bigot. In 2011, I voted no again on civil unions. This was Senate Bill 232, which today is our state civil unions law. What I learned, Mr. Speaker, back in 2010 and 2011 is this: to denigrate another person or group, to elevate you or your group, displays patterns of fear and hatred, similar to racism. I'm concerned with such overt acts of hatred and bigotry in our society. Mr. Speaker, I can share what happened after the 2011 vote. I won't mention her name, but she shared with me the story. And she, I quote, she told me this. I confirmed with her to make sure I got her words right. She said to me back in 2011, after I voted no on Senate Bill 232, Rep. Mizuno, you know what's wrong to stop me from being with the person I love. And I heard another speaker tonight talk about Tamara Young and her daughter.
Representative, you have 5 minutes. Representative Cachola, you want to yield?
Mr. Speaker, even though I'm voting no on this bill, I'm yielding 2 minutes of my time to my fellow Kalihi legislators.
Yield 2 minutes of your time.
And I just want to remind him that a lot of our constituents are against it.
Thank you very much. That wasn't called for, Representative. Okay, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe the power of love is greater than the love of power. My thoughts on love and our Lord is central to my final decision on this measure. I have to explain this. There's a nexus to my thoughts in how I came to my decision, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to explain it. First, I love my wife, May, more than anyone or anything on this earth. She has been so loyal and supportive, and it hurts her to see all the personal attacks that I've taken for my position on this measure. This is pure love, simple, pure love and joy, and I don't know what I would do without my wife. I don't know what I would do, and I don't know how my life would be if I was not allowed to marry my wife 10 years ago. It's my personal thoughts. Who am I to stand between two people who love each other? Mr. Speaker, I want to also talk about how I evolved. I want to share with you and our members my love for my personal Savior, Jesus Christ. The voices of 1,000 angels could not display the love and gratitude I have for my Savior, who accepted a sinner like me, a person so flawed, all that I am and all that He wants me to be. I owe it all to Him. No words can truly describe the love that I have for my Savior, Jesus. The passage of this bill will never change my love for Jesus. Jesus said this, Speaker, said, "You shall love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." His second commandment was, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Mr. Speaker, I quote this because these are the two greatest commandments from Jesus. And Jesus went on to say, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." He's talking about salvation. Mr. Speaker, my view is different from those in the LGBT and our churches against the same-sex marriage bill. Interestingly enough, they seem to disagree with this, that Jesus was silent on the LGBT community. And I disagree, and I'll tell you why. Because when Jesus said, "You shall love your neighbor," Jesus did not say, "By the way, we have conditions. You should only love your neighbor based on your neighbor's race, sex, age, religion, color, ancestry, disability." Or he did not say, "If your neighbor is in the LGBT community." He never said that. I wanted to share my personal testimony about Jesus. Jesus represents complete love. This is what I call faith to change the world. Mr. Speaker, just about ending it, I believe this measure, after we pass, will have hundreds, maybe perhaps thousands of our sisters and brothers in the LGBT community who will seek to have a relationship with my Savior, with our Savior. Who am I to say someone from the LGBT community should not have a relationship with Jesus? I believe in Hawaii. I believe in Jesus. I believe we have an awesome God. I also believe in our spirit of aloha, which has been impressed upon me by the good representatives from Puna, West Maui, Foster Village, Nanakuli, Waikiki, and you, Mr. Speaker, as well as so many of our colleagues. I believe in one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Speaker, for those foregoing reasons, I'm voting up on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Representative Bert Kobayashi.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support.
Please proceed.
I'd like to refer to a group of words used in committee hearing at least 100 times. One word is process. I would contend that process is never perfect, but in this case, process was fair. We had 5 days, at least 55 hours of public testimony. Would it have been fair if we had 70 hours, 100 hours, 155 hours? We had no neighbor island hearings. But normally we don't have neighbor island hearings. So if we went to the neighbor islands, should we have a 55-hour neighbor island hearing in each and every location? I'm not sure we could have done that. Certainly not in a special session. We've heard that people were cut off. They didn't have enough time to talk. In the other chamber, they had 1 minute. In our chamber, they had 2 minutes. Did they need 3 minutes or 4 minutes? I would note that Lincoln's Gettysburg Address can be recited in 2 minutes. The Lord's Prayer can be recited in 1 minute. So, what is enough? What is perfect? We will never achieve perfection, but I think we can learn from this episode. We can make the process better. I would suggest that next time there's a hearing on the other side like this, it won't be a 1 minute cutoff. I think they've learned their lesson. I know that people in this body have been talking about neighbor island video testimonies for years and years and years. Well, you know, we've got these computers and we've got Skype and we've got all kinds of stuff we didn't have 10 years ago. So maybe let's make the process better. Use some of the technology that we've been talking about for so long. The other thing about process, if you and I and everybody in this room, I think, know that to pass a bill in this legislature, you need to speak to the head and to the heart. If this process were only speaking to the head, we didn't need 55 hours of testimony. We could have had testimony like in the Senate or shorter. But speaking to the heart is how you win, how you move bills in this legislature. Emotions move more than logic. And with this extended session, committee session of 5 days and 55 hours, where we saw hundreds, over 1,000, I'm told, of real human beings, real people who spoke from their heart, I think that whatever you can say, people were moved. And I think that some of that movement is reflected in this bill. So, we deal here with the art of the possible. Politics has been called the art of the possible. We were told in the auditorium that the governor put us in this box. Well, many things put us in this box. The U.S. Supreme Court put us in this box with an unexpected decision. The governor put us in this box. The Senate put us in this box. Our own rules put us in this box. Our own, how would you say, normal procedures. But I think we tried to make the process fair with the situation that we had in hand. And we exercised the art of the possible and tried to produce a fair process. Hopefully, next time, we can do better. The other thing I'd like to say is
Mr.
this.
Speaker, I yield my time.
Jordan.
The other thing I'd like to say is this. We are here today on Aloha Friday with the statue of Father Damien, I should say Saint Damien, dividing people on both sides. Well, somehow I think it's sort of prophetic and certainly poetic and profound that Father Damien is drawing the dividing line. But it is an illustration of the division here between this side and that side, between this side of the gallery, that side of the gallery, between the yes votes and the no votes. And my contention the last time I spoke here on Wednesday was that we've got a terrible situation where we're talking past each other. One of the great distinguished professors and U.S. senators, a guy named Daniel Patrick Moynihan, said, "You are entitled to your opinions, but you are not entitled to your own facts." Well, we've gone beyond that. We differ on our opinions, we differ on facts, and as I said last time, we differ on self-selected, self-reinforcing information. We don't like the information, we denigrate it, dismiss it, deny it, diminish it. No good. Well, what do we do around here? One of the other words that we heard over 100 times there was God, church, faith. On Wednesday, a woman from Kapahulu came to me and talked about all those things. And I told her, I've got a division of churches in the district. Two of the largest churches in my district support, two of the largest churches don't support. The two of the largest Episcopal churches just outside my district support. You know, what am I to do? Denigrate the churches, deny the churches, diminish the churches that don't support my position? What do we say to the Methodist churches who are divided on this side and that side? What do we say to the Lutheran churches on this side and that side? What do we say to the Episcopal churches, St. Andrew's Priory and the two Episcopal churches in my neighborhood? You don't count at all if you're on the wrong side, because the Episcopal Church and statewide conference voted to support same-sex marriage. I'm not about to dismiss and discount the Episcopal Church. And with this woman from Kapulu, I said, what about the other people in the district? The Buddhist, the Jewish, the Shinto church members. I've got lots of them. Do I say, well, you don't even belong in this discussion because your God is a different God? I can just delete you from my thinking. You know, we shouldn't be doing that. And same with the other questions that we had. Another term that we heard over 100 times in that room was the voice of the people, the people's voice. Well, as was said, we don't know what the people's voice is by just sitting in that room. We have a lot of polls that show that there are a majority of people in Hawaii. 2 polls in this calendar year. Another third poll that showed a 44 to 44% split. We have a Gallup poll nationwide that shows pretty much the same percentage as the 2 Hawaii polls of 2013, about mid-50 support, about mid-30 oppose. But we don't take polls to base our decision on every issue, and we can't.
Mr. Speaker, I yield my time.
I don't think there's any more time to yield. Would you please wrap it up?
For my second.
Representative?
Okay.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Speaker,
much.
Mr. Speaker, hello. I'll yield my
Representative
time. Thank you.
Kobayashi, please wrap
Okay,
it up.
I should try to finish quickly. But when we look at the people who came here, what did we see? We saw a very unusual mix of people. There were more young people in their 20s and 30s in that auditorium than we have probably seen in any public hearing. There were more Hawaiians in that auditorium that we have seen in almost any public hearing. There were more Chinese immigrants there than we have seen ever, I think, in any public hearing. There were some gaps.
Representative.
Anyway, there were fewer people over age 50 who probably make up the voting majority. So what's the majority? And how do you pick? You say, I'm going to define majority this way, I'm going to define majority that way. At any rate, I would contend that there is good basis for voting yes on this bill, and I would suggest that we understand that we are at a place where we can no longer, I think, come to some agreement on certain beliefs, certain facts. So, as
Thank
I
you
said,
very much, Representative. Twice have been yielded already. I'm very sorry, Representative, but others need to talk. Please. Representative.
Me or him?
No.
Which representative?
No, I'm still Bert Kobayashi. He has the floor. He has not relinquished the floor.
At any rate, what I'm trying to say is that we have come to the point where we need to make a decision. And the decision rests with us. Let all of these good men and women elected by the people decide. We've done it before. Decide what is good and bad, what is belief and fact, what is right and wrong, what is relevant and irrelevant, what is good for the long term, what is good for the people.
Okay, Representative, we're going to have to cut you short.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, Representative Tokioka, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, for the last 12 days, we've been in special session, Mr. Speaker. Oh, and Mr. Speaker, I am in opposition to SB1, HD1. You know, for the past 12 days, we've been dealing with special session. And for the past few days, we've been trying to figure out as legislators, as representatives of the House, what we're going to say to address the concerns of the people that came here, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, as I look around the room and I hear the floor speeches, everybody's passionate. We've been here for a long time, Mr. Speaker. My speech was kind of long, but I don't know if, in fact, I know. Nothing I say is going to change anyone's vote. I know that. But what I do want to address, Mr. Speaker, is the concerns of the people that came here to testify. And it's unfortunate that an issue like this, which is so personal to the people of Hawaii, feelings get hurt on both sides, Mr. Speaker. And this is what I regret the most. And I hope that no one in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, at the end of this vote feels good about what we did. Anybody who has to vote, you're going to hurt people on both sides, and that's sad, because we were forced to come into special session, Mr. Speaker. You know, my comments, we're going to address thanking the chairs of the committee, because we did what the Senate didn't do. We heard the people that came, and I thank the chairs. Despite a moment when where the testimony was going to be cut off, the chairs stood strong. So I thank the chairs for that, Mr. Speaker. You know, I wanted to address some of the comments that were made in the testimony, Mr. Speaker, because some of it was, in fact, a lot of it was very hurtful, and none of us condone any of that. You know, I wanted to address Mr. Ma'afala's comments. I wanted to address Mr. Kukahiko's comments, because I spoke with them after the meeting. But you know what, Mr. Speaker, I know that none of this is going to change anyone's mind. So all I want to say, Mr. Speaker, for everyone is the people had 2 minutes to talk. I'm going over 10 minutes, but there was a slight, 10 seconds, but there was a slight pause in my speech. But the resounding thing that we heard from the people that came here, Mr. Speaker, when that door opens, is going to be, let the people vote, Mr. Speaker. For those reasons, I'm voting no on SB1, HD1. Thank you.
Order.
And Mr. Speaker, can I insert written comments into the journal?
Certainly, yep.
Thank you.
So ordered. Representative Fukumoto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In opposition.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Let me first start by just respectfully disagreeing with my colleague from Kahala. This process wasn't good enough. These people outside and upstairs, they know that, Mr. Speaker. But just back to my original comments, I started thinking weeks ago about what I was going to say today. And it was my hope that we as a legislative body would have listened to all sides involved and come up with a measure that would have satisfied the needs of all parties. Unfortunately, this process seems to have divided us even further. I've been told that history is going to look down on my vote, and maybe it will or maybe it won't. But holding this position was never about me or my legacy. In the end, this broken process made me choose between the rights to benefits and the rights of conscience. And I can't vote for a measure that would further inhibit the free practice of religion, which I know that many of my constituents hold dear. Mr. Speaker, it's a rare thing to see two sides of an issue so diametrically opposed that they're unable to reconcile their differences. But that's the point that we seem to have come to, and it's a very sad failure of the democratic process. Given more time, Mr. Speaker, we may have been able to come up with more options or found a way to negotiate between the rights to equal benefits and the rights of conscience, but we weren't afforded that time. This isn't an easy vote to take, and it shouldn't be an easy vote for anyone. Anyone who is easily voting no hasn't felt the weight of the pain that their vote will cause the LGBT community, who just want equal rights. And anyone who is easily voting yes isn't feeling the full weight of the fear of thousands and thousands of local residents who came to this legislature concerned that their rights to practice their religion, to teach their beliefs, and to raise their children could be taken away. If not now, 10 or 20 years from now, because of what we did here. This body did a disservice to the opponents of this measure, Mr. Speaker. And in my opinion, the deck was stacked against the opponents from the start. We've even seen these opponents maligned and mischaracterized on the floor today. Perhaps the people reading and watching aren't concerned with this issue. But I would ask them, what if it's your cause next time? What we've seen this week is a government that will ignore the masses and tip the scale in favor of its own agenda. Mr. Speaker, I think this is the greatest concern for my generation. In the past few weeks, I've heard overwhelming opposition to this measure from my constituents who, like me, just want to ensure that the rights of conscience are protected. It's my duty, Mr. Speaker, to be their representative in this body. I wish we could have come up with another solution, and I wish we could have had a more full debate. But today, I find myself with no choice but to vote no. Mr. Speaker, this was a difficult process to be involved in, and this is a painful vote to cast, and as I said, it should be. But as we move forward, I know that there are thousands of people that feel disappointed in their government and disenfranchised by this process. This, Mr. Speaker, should be disconcerting to everyone. Mr. Speaker, this process is broken, and the measure is flawed because of it. So for these reasons, Mr. Speaker, I'm voting no.
All right, thank you very much. Members, I know you, and people in the gallery, I know you have a lot of passion, but please keep your passion to yourself as we move along. And we're all very tired. We're all doing the best we can. Yes, let me see. Representative Foley, did you get up? Okay. We'll have Foley first. All right, Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I'm physically, I'm mentally, and I'm emotionally exhausted. It's been a long couple weeks, but I'll start where I began earlier today. Take a look at the gallery, Mr. Speaker. Here we are, still divided. Those who are for and those who are against. Outside, there's two red lines that divide those who are for and those who are against. And yet we talk about aloha, Mr. Speaker. Does that look like aloha to you? It doesn't look like aloha to me. And any measure, I don't care what it is. When I would get into fights with my siblings, my mom and dad would say, it doesn't matter who's right, you do what's right. And the division that anything brings between you and a brother or a sister or a family member is wrong. Here we are. Here we are, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of people will be divided over this issue. You know we could have done better. The governor knows we could have done better. Everybody sitting here knows we could have done better. But why didn't we? This morning, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to bring a 70-pound bag of pedigree dog food, a 40-pound bag of apples, and a 40-pound bag of kitty litter. The dog food and the apples were for the dog and pony show we've had the past couple weeks. And the kitty litter is for the smell and the stink that has been caused by this special session. Mr. Speaker, I'm a product of a multiracial marriage. I've been attacked because my mother's white. I've been attacked because my father is not. I've been told I look civilized for a Polynesian. And last year in January, I was told that my race is athletically inferior. Mr. Speaker, I've actually dealt with worse things from my own brothers. These things, they hit you. But Mr. Speaker, I find it interesting that the people of Hawaii who made Aloha what it is, somehow this body feels the need to educate the people of Hawaii on what Aloha is. The things that have been talked about, all the travesties that have been committed on the mainland, Mr. Speaker, the Jim Crow laws, the making it illegal of intermarrying between different races. Let the mainland be the mainland, Mr. Speaker. Let Hawaii be Hawaii. Mr. Speaker, in October 27th, 1838, an extermination order was issued by the executive, the governor of Missouri, against those who practiced my religion. It was legal to kill those who believed what I believed. I know what it's like. My family, my ancestor, Heber C. Kimball's best friend was David Patton Kimball, who was shot and killed because of what he believed in these very United States. He named my ancestor, my third great-grandfather, David Patton Kimball, after him. That legacy of protecting religious freedoms is something that is dear to my heart. Mr. Speaker, that executive order to exterminate those of my religious faith wasn't rescinded until 137 years in 1976. I know a little bit about discrimination, Mr. Speaker. And the thing is everybody here on this floor knows something about it. My favorite person probably in this building, Mr. Speaker, is the good representative from Hawaii Island. My brother over there from the 442nd 100th Infantry Battalion. We like to sing and talk together. It is my aspiration to rise to the level of what they were able to accomplish for this great state of Hawaii, Mr. Speaker. My culture has been described as intellectually, socially, legally, and culturally inferior, Mr. Speaker, because we believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. Mr. Speaker, I see my time is up. And if there's something that's been wrong without doubt, is the division that this bill has done to this community. If there's something wrong, if there's something that's unacceptable, is the failure of leadership to bring the people together instead of dividing them. Mr. Speaker, and that was within our power. That was within our power. And the reason why we had to swallow this pill was for financial reasons that the governor insisted on. Mr. Speaker, I'm not even sure if the governor understands what Hawaii is all about anymore. He talks about a canoe. How can a canoe float in the ocean when the canoe is split in half? Mr. Speaker, I believe this body, we asked for 5 days of recess so that we can take this measure.
Mr. Speaker,
yes,
time's expired.
Mr.
Your
Speaker.
time is up.
Mr. Speaker, I'll wrap up.
Okay.
I'll wrap up. Mr. Speaker, we asked for 5 days to take this measure to our community. Just 5 days, Mr. Speaker. I would hope that this body would possess the fortitude and the leadership to stand up to a governor who is not doing what is right. And with that, Mr. Speaker, and for those reasons, I am opposed to SB1.
Thank you very much, Representative. All right, member. Representative Collins.
Speaker, I rise in opposition.
Please proceed.
First, I would like to thank everyone who have taken the time to participate in the process over the past few weeks. I would like to request from everyone that no matter the result of this evening's vote, we as a community, we as a state need to move forward by demonstrating acceptance, tolerance, compassion, humility, love, and aloha to each other. I rise in opposition because a majority of the people in my district have weighed in on this issue at a ratio of 4-1 in opposition to Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1. Not because they are against marriage equality, but because they are against the process we, the legislature, have taken by not allowing them to vote. They made time to call, to email, and to write letters to my office voicing their concerns about the bill. They even took the time to participate through testimony during our committee hearings. Who am I to deny my constituents the opportunity to make an educated, reasonable, and compassionate vote on same-sex marriage? A great president by the name of Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "Democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education." Who are we to rush the process? I am where I am because I was elected by the people I represent, and I have listened. They understand the religious protections, and they understand that this is a civil rights issue. But they also understand that under the United States Constitution, we are given the freedom and right to vote. Mr. Speaker, we have heard through the day, let the people vote. Let the people vote, and that is why I'm voting no on this measure. Thank you.
All right, Representative, thank you very much. I'm going to have Representative Yamani, had his hand up, and then I'll call on you, Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Yamani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition and ask that the record indicate that my community has spoken against the passage of this measure, and I have listened. Mr. Speaker, my office has collected over 630 responses at a ratio of over 3.5-1 in opposition. Members and Speaker, my committee have asked that we take this measure slowly and give them the opportunity to voice their concerns by allowing them to cast their vote. We took that away, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the people that have responded to my office and in my community are not those only of faith, but these are social workers, teachers, doctors, parents, office managers, and family who have expressed both support and objection to this measure. But many, Mr. Speaker, have said, give them an opportunity to vote. How do you determine which and whose values are more important? Mr. Speaker, this measure is about equal rights, and it does have an impact on people's ability to practice their freedom of religion. This issue has split people, Mr. Speaker. I have the record, I have verification of people within their own family, within their own household, recording different votes. Mr. Speaker, I have witnessed a husband telling me his vote, and his wife silently says, "I do not agree." Mr. Speaker, we have had emails, phone calls, letters from a parent, and then receive a letter, email, or phone call from their children with the opposite position. Mr. Speaker, we need to recognize that there are people in our community who have been wronged, bullied, and persecuted because of their sexual orientation, and that is not pono. We also need to recognize that this measure impacts the core values of people's faith, their sense of family, and their moral values. But is this the way? Does this bring healing, Mr. Speaker? Regardless of the vote outcome, Mr. Speaker, I ask that those who have preached for tolerance and equality, that you now have an opportunity to show what tolerance and acceptance is by your tolerance of people who have a different view. And those who have preached love, who shall have the opportunity to show how true love of one another's brothers and sisters are, who you do not agree with. So, Mr. Speaker, please note that my community voice is in opposition, and I would like additional written comments inserted.
So ordered, Representative.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Johansson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition.
Please proceed.
I too want to begin by thanking proponents and opponents of this measure for being an integral part of the government and for making this one of the most vibrant expressions of democracy that I've seen in my time at the Capitol. Although it has not been easy for anyone, I think we would have a much better Hawaii if everyone continued this level of engagement. The active practice of democracy that includes maximum public engagement is often harder than we think because we so rarely see it play out on this scale at the Capitol. However, it has been worth it, and I think Hawaii will be all the better for having its citizens involved in the process. The concept and mechanics of democracy have weighed very heavily on me as we've debated this issue. As with many of my colleagues, I was still a child when Hawaii began the debate about same-sex marriage. The 1998 constitutional amendment was on the first ever ballot that I was eligible to be able to cast as an 18-year-old in college. I truly wish that we had more time to explore this issue, to answer some of those lingering questions, and more time to deliberate. What has been most difficult for many of us to reconcile is the fundamental question of how to grant benefits to our fellow citizens who are merely looking for equal treatment. I do not necessarily wish to see people in a loving, committed relationship denied tax and other benefits. Given the Supreme Court's rulings, which served as a catalyst for extension of federal benefits to individuals in same-sex marriages, I continue to believe that relief can be sought at the federal level to include extension of those federal benefits to those individuals in civil unions and/or other state-recognized equivalents. We have not sufficiently explored many of those avenues because we were called into a special session against our legislative will. This bill, in ostensibly seeking to enable the granting of those federal benefits, engenders a whole host of significant and real concerns and issues that truly have yet to be answered and yet to be reconciled. If this bill passes, I still don't know what will happen in the future when a newly created state-sanctioned right of same-sex marriage potentially conflicts with First Amendment constitutional rights of the freedom to practice one's religion. I don't know that any of us can answer that with any degree of certainty. There are two competing paradigms here for people who are yes and people who are no. There are two competing values for people who are yes and people who are no. But I ask, again, what happens when they conflict? How will the legislature and the courts reconcile that conflict? Again, I do not think that anyone here can answer that with certainty. That is why, because I believe we have not sufficiently answered those questions and really addressed what I think is fundamentally at the heart of our debate, that I continue to be in opposition. I appreciate very much the broadened religious exemptions in the most current form of the bill. I thank my colleagues for expanding those protections. Unfortunately, I do not think the current version of the bill addresses all of the myriad issues and concerns brought up by so many in the public that so many of them continue to have. We have not sufficiently explored and addressed many of those concerns. During this debate over same-sex marriage, the Hawaii State Constitution has come up time and time again. I spent many of the last few days reading through it, recognizing that it is the foundation upon which our democracy here in the island rests. Article 1, Section 1 of the Hawaii State Constitution states, "All political power of this state is inherent in the people, and the responsibility for the exercise thereof rests with the people. All government is founded on this authority." We were all duly elected and thus imbued with the authority to cast votes on behalf of our people. I recognize this fact. I also recognize that it is important to respect the will of the people and to honor it in a way that is more than just word. it is important to honor it in action as well. Ordinarily, this level of opposition to a measure would be sufficient to defeat it, or certainly to postpone it. Yet we are continuing to move forward with this measure. In so doing, I think the legislature is not honoring in action our commitment to government by the people and for the people. I think this measure is moving forward at a pace that is in opposition to the will of the people. Because of all of the many lingering questions and concerns, the issues yet to be reconciled, and the policy that I think is in opposition to the will of the people, I must respectfully oppose this bill. It is my sincere desire, however, that irrespective of the outcome of today's vote, that we leave the Capitol not as proponents or opponents of the bill, not as winners or losers, but as the people of Hawaii, people who may disagree, but fundamentally as the people of Hawaii. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. Further discussion, members? Yes, Representative Ichiyama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Senate Bill 1.
Please proceed.
In addition to my remarks on the floor, may I have permission to insert additional written remarks into the journal?
Sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to sincerely thank all of the community members that took the time to call, email, or write to me. We all have busy lives, and I'm grateful for the thoughtful input and comments shared by the residents of the state of Hawaii. I know it isn't always easy to put your views out there, and please know that I took all of the comments to heart. Thank you also to the chairs and the members of the House Judiciary and Finance Committees. They were dedicated and steadfast in their willingness to hear from our community. Thank you for taking the time, over 55 hours in all, to give everyone an opportunity to let their voices be heard. Thank you also to you, Mr. Speaker, for your leadership during this session. Mr. Speaker, I support this measure because fundamentally, I do not believe that sexual orientation is a choice. Whether it is a function of our DNA, our neurological pathways, or our psyche, we love who we love. Because I believe that sexual orientation is an immutable characteristic, like race or sex, the state cannot discriminate on that basis. I do not support discrimination in our laws because I believe it weakens our community. I also support Senate Bill 1 because it reflects a compromise between the free exercise of religion and the protection of civil rights. House Draft 1 incorporates broad protection for religious organizations and nonprofits controlled or supervised by a religious organization. We heard the testimony and listened to the request for more protection of religious freedom. Many critics of the bill today have said that these protections do not go far enough, that freedom of conscience is still in danger. Is this the right balance? Is it enough? Does it go too far? What will happen to our society? These are hard questions that will have to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, when the United States Congress passed the 13th Amendment to end slavery, 1/8 of the US population were slaves. No one knew where they would go, how they would react, how they would find jobs. Many pose the question, does this go too far? What will happen to our society? Change is difficult. It raises difficult and weighty questions. I don't have all the answers, and I don't know that anyone on this floor has all the answers. As a community, we'll need to come together to help each other find those answers. After this session, we will need to listen again and learn from each other. How can we live together with respect and tolerance? In our island state, our community cannot remain divided. We must depend on each other, rely on each other, and support each other. Moving forward on Senate Bill 1 is not the end of the discussion, but the beginning. I'd like to close my remarks with a quote from President Lincoln, words that I hope will guide all of us in the months and years to come. With malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and all nations. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Representative. Representative Morikawa and then Takayama. Representative Morikawa, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. In support, I just want permission to insert written comments.
So ordered.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Representative Takayama.
Mr. Speaker, may I use my remaining time?
Okay, so ordered.
Thank you. I rise in support.
Please
and may
proceed.
I ask permission to insert additional written comments?
So ordered.
I'd like to express my thanks to the chairs of Judiciary and Finance for their leadership on this measure. I'd also like to thank the thousands who took the time to express their views on both sides of this issue, in writing and in testimony. I'd also like to thank everyone who congratulated me on my 38th wedding anniversary, because I mentioned that I spent it last week during one of our marathon hearings here at the Capitol. As a product of that marriage, my wife and I are blessed to have 3 wonderful daughters whom we love unconditionally and for whom we want every opportunity for happiness. And if their pursuit of happiness included marrying someone of the same sex, we would want that for them too. That is the wish of many sons and daughters, brothers and sisters throughout Hawaii. And it is time that we as a society remove the legal roadblock that prevents same-sex couples from enjoying the benefits of marriage. Marriage, above all, should be a matter of love, commitment, and trust, regardless of gender. And I am truly confident that allowing same-sex couples the opportunity to marry will not damage at all my traditional marriage or anyone else's. For those reasons, I vote yes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Representative. Any further discussion, members? Yes, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I start, may I ask for permission to submit written comments?
So ordered.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I contemplated on standing up today because I stood up on Wednesday. See, 3 days ago, very few people knew me. And after I stood up on this floor on Wednesday and spoke, and I can't tell you what I said because I didn't write it down. I just spoke. I became blasted. When you talk about body blows and coming out with battle wounds and scars, anybody sitting or standing on this floor is not going to take what I'm going to take. But you know, Mr. Speaker, I think I was put on this path for some reason, and I'm not going to ask why. I was approached by 2 representatives yesterday. Joe, just WR. You know, Mr. Speaker, I can't. Because as I told you on Wednesday, I have to be impeccable with my word, and I can't go back now. I'm sorry to say, with a heavy heart, it's still in opposition. I expressed my reasons why on Wednesday, and they still stand firm. I am not comfortable with SB1, HD1. It is not balanced legislation, in my opinion. I cannot rise up benefits with the possibility of eroding religious protections and freedom of conscience. You see, Mr. Speaker, again, I'm not held to any specific conviction. But I do have certain beliefs that I hold near and dear. And in this process, I have been shown so much love by a community I thought hated me. And I found so much hate in a community that I thought embraced me. See, Mr. Speaker, I have no hate for them. And I thank the people that have sent me emails. It's great support. I just want to share with you one from a pastor on a church in Maui. And I think this speaks volumes. He says, "Thank you for your help. Thank you for helping me to find hope in our government, the process, and humanity. I hope that you will continue to be a bridge between the church and the LGBT community. I believe that there is a great division between the LGBT community and the churches of Hawaii. It may be God's calling on your life to help us to bridge and break down those barriers and preconceived ideas of who gay people are. Despite my sexual orientation, Mr. Speaker, you have displayed courage and integrity. You are breaking down stereotypes in my mind, according to this pastor, and I just needed to tell you that I honor, appreciate, and respect you." I want to thank that pastor, Mr. Donovan. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to take this journey. I thank my community for allowing me to stand here and their great support, because it was a rough day yesterday, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I heed my rising number 2.
Order.
Thank you very much to the representative from the 43rd District. Mr. Speaker, I don't know what's going to happen. And frankly, I'm here to do my duty. I will always uphold my duty. And I'm sorry for the GLTB community. I walked in this place 3 years ago asking my community, I don't want to be the poster child. I've become the poster child. And I accept that. I ran into a lady in the hall yesterday while I was here. And they just wanted to thank me. I didn't know who she was. She was in those 5-day hearings. And I've met so many new people. And she told me this one quote, and I wrote it down, and I'm going to end with this quote. "Character in crises are not made, but revealed." And I think I'm beginning to understand my character and my integrity. And I will always stand by it. And I appreciate my House members that have stood by me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, thank you very much. All right, members, we've been very tolerant of you. Please respect the body here. Okay, Representative Aquino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition of the measure.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. First, I would like to thank the many who have chosen to be a part of the legislative process, the many who sacrificed time, resources, money, and other things to testify and share their support or opposition to SB1. Also, I'd like to thank the House leadership and the chairs of the Judiciary and Finance Committees for their patience, hard work, and determination throughout the process. Mahalo. Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose the said measure for several reasons, but will speak of only two tonight. First, out of the hundreds of emails, phone calls, postcards, and letters from constituents from the district that I represent, there was an overwhelming sentiment to have a hand in deciding this issue through a constitutional amendment while opposing SB1 for a multitude of reasons, nearly 80%. Secondly, while I appreciate the hard work put into this measure, I believe that the protections in the House draft could have been strengthened to further safeguard religious freedoms. There are still some concerns that need to be addressed that may lead to the possibilities of litigation in the future. I wish we had more time. In fact, take our time to address an issue of this magnitude. Regardless of what happens tonight, Mr. Speaker, I humbly ask for tolerance and respect moving forward so we all, as a community, can heal together. For these reasons, Mr. Speaker, and for other reasons, I respectfully oppose this measure. Permission to submit further written comments. Thank
So
you.
ordered, Representative, and thank you very much. Further discussion, members? Further discussion? If none, then I'll
Speaker,
call for...
I stand in support.
Representative Haitian.
I just would like to share a quote from Desmond Tutu. I equate homophobia to injustice of apartheid, and that's so contrary to the heart of our Lord Jesus Christ. I can't for the life of me imagine that God would say, I'm going to punish you because you are black. You should have been white. I will punish you because you're a woman. You should have been a man. I will punish you because you are homosexual. You ought to have been heterosexual. I can't for the life of me believe that is how God sees things. See, Speaker, I go to a church that is acceptant of gay couples. And my pastor, Pastor Tim Mason, was out here waving signs in support of marriage equality. And I want to thank him for the guidance that he has given me through this very difficult time. The church I attend supports same-sex couples. They accept them. So much so that there is a couple that just had twins. The whole congregation is supportive and is involved in raising their twins. I just pray one day that other churches across the state can do the same thing, because nobody in this gallery can deny kids do not have the choice of their parents. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Representative. Thank you. All right, members.
Mr. Speaker, again in support, but may I have permission to put additional remarks in the journal?
So ordered.
Thank you.
Representative Fukumoto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Still in opposition, but can I also get written comments in the journal, please?
So ordered,
Thank you.
Representative. Representative Collin.
Mr. Speaker, still in opposition. Permission to enter into comments.
So ordered,
Thank you.
Representative. Representative Kawakami.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Still in support and like permission to add in additional written comments.
So ordered. Representative Johansson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Still in opposition and permission to insert written comments.
So ordered. Representative Ward.
Speaker, same request.
So ordered.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nakashima.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In support and permission to insert written comments.
So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, same request.
Representative.
Thank you.
So ordered.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Where are you? Representative Foley.
Still in opposition, but permission to insert written comments.
So ordered. Representative.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Representative.
I humbly apologize. My position is in opposition and not support.
Well, I thought maybe you changed your mind. Oh.
And I'd like to insert written comments.
All right. So ordered.
Mr.
Yes,
Speaker.
Representative
Thank
McKelvey.
you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was going to stand up and say a few words, but I know the hour is getting late, so I would just like to first adopt the words in support of the representative from Moanalua. Would like to enter into the record the letter of the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission preferring the original Senate bill version and decrying that our exemptions in the House Bill 1 are too overbroad in our attempt to make sure we can reach this balance. And finally, I just want to leave one thing to everybody here who's watching us during the recess when we're mingling with each other. My good friends, like the good representative from Kahului, from Waianae, and yes, even Kapolei. We disagree on this issue, Mr. Speaker, but they're my good friends. And we share laughs and tears and everything together, and they always will be. So I hope that our camaraderie, despite our differences, will stand as a symbol to the state of Hawaii that we can get along. We can see an understanding. And I always will love them even though we don't agree. And thank you very much, Mr.
Very
Speaker.
good, Representative. Thank you very much. Yes, Representative Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I speak in opposition. May I have the words from our great representative from Mililani?
So ordered.
And also may I have the, an opportunity to say a few words?
So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, it is with a heavy heart that I oppose this bill. I want better for our people. I am a duly elected member of this House of Representatives. I represent the citizens of the island of East Maui, Lanai, and Molokai, and of course, Kaho'olawe and Molokini. And I am a native Hawaiian. If you look into the gallery, what do you see? A divided community. Last week, our Joint Committee on Judiciary and Finance heard the most contentious bill I've ever seen in my years of service. Hour after hour, we heard compelling testimonies expressing how the issue of same-sex marriage would affect our ohana, be it our blood relatives in Kama'aina or Malahini, or who have come to our islands to make Hawaii their home. We are all one community, one ohana, and this bill, like no other, has divided us. The people's expectations were raised when our committees took the unprecedented step of allowing testimony to be received over a 5-day period. We received the equivalent of more than 30 reams of paper from our people. Person after person came forward to speak for just 2 minutes, and even though they knew they would command just a short amount of our attention, they patiently waited for hours, for days, sitting on the cold granite hallway floors or standing under the hot sun at the rotunda for the opportunity to say what they could. As it was expressed that some had felt, no matter what side they were on, it broke my heart because the criticisms that I have heard from our constituents were some of our colleagues did not treat our citizens with respect that they deserve. Some of our colleagues chose to belittle testifiers for their beliefs or the way they talked or for what they said. Or many were abruptly interrupted, mis-sentenced, or told their message was repetitive or were dismissed without being heard. Many left humiliated, upset, and disturbed, asking themselves, was the time worth it? Is anyone listening? Receiving this feedback from our constituents was heartbreaking to me. I blame the process. And our constituents still came back each day, and they stayed. Some may have even lost their jobs to come and stay. Hundreds upon hundreds came with the hope that their mana'o would be considered sincerely. But despite letting thousands of people speak for days, the committee came to a decision in just a mere 2 hours. 2 hours. No one could read all that material and consider everything that was said within that amount of time and treat our people's mana'o with the aloha it deserved. Again, I blame our process. Aloha was a central theme throughout the public hearing. Persons both in support and opposition used this term frequently throughout the proceedings. It was used so frequently, its meaning seemed lost to everyone. Aloha became the buzzword, and by using it, it were led to think that all the words were pono. There are 2 testimonies that stood out for me. The first was from Carla Keli'iho'omalu Akiona, Ahulu Kumu from Mililani. And this is what she quoted in her testimony. We Hawaiians have so much taken from us, and just when you think there's nothing more that can be taken, this happens. We don't appreciate people coming into our hale, robbing us of our religious freedoms, trying to destroy our families, restricting our voting rights, and polluting these spiritual lands by dismantling what God has instituted, marriage between one man and one woman. She continued, you need to understand what aloha is. You have to understand what is, and most people do not know what aloha is. Aloha is everything that is pono, everything that is righteous, correct, and everything that is in the light. Anything else is other, is dark. So if you want to talk about love, kindness, and compassion, and all of those things that what it is, aloha is the most sacred word in the Hawaiian culture, and it is being frivolously used by people utilizing my culture, my aloha, and to pass what we all know is wrong. Mr. Speaker, this brings only sadness to my heart after hearing Ms. Akiona's testimony. She further, at a later time, expresses that testifying and trying to get your point across in 2 minutes is very difficult, but being called back up and questioned
Representative, your time is up.
Mr. Speaker, I still have 3 minutes remaining on my time. I yield my time.
Thank you.
So ordered, Representative.
But being called back up and questioned is much more difficult. Trying to understand the questions, gathering your thoughts, organizing them in a short amount of time, and delivering your answers in a manner that all can comprehend is quite a challenge. Emotions also begin to arise and at times are hard to control. With that being said, I would now like to address your question and of how this bill would affect the Hawaiians. I ask you, how would you feel if someone came into your hale and robbed you of your culture and lifestyle? If they stripped you of your lands, language, queen, hula, which keeps the history of Hawaii and its people, and other rights to say the least, how would you feel if your children, relatives, and friends were best and punished at school for speaking their Hawaiian language or at home by a non-Hawaiian spouse? How about all the diseases brought to Hawaii, killing thousands of Hawaiians? This is just the tip of the iceberg. Put yourself in our shoes. I now have a very small eke, or bag of rights, taking my religious freedoms, restricting my voting rights, parents' freedom of speech, destroying our families, and imposing this bill on our vulnerable children will not have a positive effect on Hawaii. My small eke has now become much lighter. I have next to nothing left in my bag, and as was said by another testifier by the name of Lei, it's like going back to the old days. We're going backwards. Are you feeling sad and down? Is it becoming hard for you to function and continue on? How's your family feeling? We've worked so hard to survive. This bill is a hanaho of theft for the Hawaiians. Theft always leaves a horrible impact on its victim. More I became saddened. Mr. Speaker, this process has forced all of us to sometimes show our lack of aloha. We do not mean to do that. We promised our people we would listen to them. Do we hear them? Do we see them? All of us feel that we do. But the people feel that we should take this to a vote because they haven't been heard. That the integrity of our process, we have failed them, and the integrity of this institution has been lost. The second testimony that I will never forget was from a tutu from a neighbor island. Her written testimony is somewhere buried in the blizzard of paper we received. She ended her testimony by singing Aloha Oi. For Native Hawaiians, this song has special meaning. Its lyrics speak of two lovers.
Representative, I think
Mr. Speaker.
Your 3 minutes is up.
Mr. Speaker, I yield my final 3 minutes, Mr. Speaker.
So ordered.
Thank you. For Native Hawaiians, this song has a special meaning. Its lyrics speak of two lovers who share one last embrace before departing, but it serves to remind us of its writer, Queen Liliuokalani. The testifier's message was powerful. When our queen was deposed in the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom, she also protested through legal means, imploring the United States government to cease their hostility and restore what was wrongly taken. Our queen, like many of us today, believed that the great powers would do justice and hear her plea. Tragically, her words fell upon deaf ears, and our people have suffered through genocide and indignation under the yoke of foreign aggression. Again, we face aggression from afar that threatens our culture and the very essence of who we are, the ability to determine as a people what is pono, what is in the light, what is aloha. And the people's plea have fallen on deaf ears. Aue. Mr. Speaker, I blame the process again. But I would like to take this time to also recognize that even though we were faced with not so good situation in our process, I must acknowledge that in the House, we made every effort to try and accommodate those who came and testified. Yes, it may not be sufficient time that many may criticize us, but an extra minute did help. And yes, our chairs was open to allowing for more testimony, and it took some discussion among many of us. And yes, our committee members, exhausted and filled with emotion and compassion, and of course, just not wanting to really address this issue in the moment, stayed committed to this process that we were forced to do, stayed committed to the people that they serve, and did what they did at the best that they could do. And still, our community is divided. But I would like to say to my colleagues in the House, I commend you, I respect you, and I feel that you are courageous in whatever position that you have decided, because we all have different constituency. And the thing about it is, we were forced into this process where I feel if we had taken it up in regular session, the outcome may be a little different. So please know that I support you, and I have no ill feelings towards my colleagues.
All
And
right,
I say,
Representative, your time is up.
Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker.
I'll yield my second time.
Right.
Thank you.
And Representative Giamatti, Representative, been speaking for 20 minutes, if you
Thank
understand that. Please
And-
proceed.
Thank you. And I say to all of our constituents across the state, this decision was not easy for each and every one of us. No matter what side you took, it was very hard because we all are being criticized. But I want you to know that my no is not because I don't support equality. In fact, it's just the opposite. I support equality for all people. And because my district is diverse, I had to look at everything. And so I know there are many that are hurt by my decision. And I just want to say I'm sorry, and please forgive me. But if you know who I am, and if you understand where I'm coming from, I'm standing no on this process that should have never happened. Because if we talk about equality, then why aren't we addressing the reconciliation of our Native Hawaiian people? Why aren't we addressing the many ill issues that are plaguing our communities, like the homeless, or the drugs that are coming into our homeland, or even our families that need our support? Why aren't we looking at those issues if we're going to do a special session? And that's why, for me, it's about the process. And I feel that this issue alone was not enough for us to call because it did not have an urgency or of an emergency nature. But I do support equality. And I hope many of you can understand, but I support all people. And yes, this bill needs much more improvements. And you have heard so many amendments, floor amendments, and they may have come at a later time, but it's because the process didn't allow us the time to be able to go deeply into what we felt was addressing our constituents. So I commend every introducer, and I commend this body for entertaining it. As exhausting as it has been, I just want to say thank you to all of my colleagues. because I know that for all of us, it's not going to be easy as we go into our homelands. And I hope that my message tonight could be after whatever happens after the vote, that we can go home to begin to heal and to now talk about better things and not bad things, because this has been hard for each and every one of us. And that you can respect each and every one of our decisions, because we are unique and we are elected by our different districts. But more importantly, when we talk about love, let's show what we truly mean by unconditional love. We've heard so many people talk about it. Now it's time to put it in action. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say to you, thank you, because I know you've had a hard task. And I want to say thank you to all the staff, because they worked really hard. But again, this was an experience that we can all learn from. And I hope we never have to go through this again, as painful as it is. Because if we do special session, I hope we can work on issues that do matter in all of our districts, that we all can benefit from. Thank you very much.
All right, Representative, thank you very much. All right, members, Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 2 days ago on second reading, I pointed out to you factual inaccuracies in the committee report. Again, on page 7 of the Standing Committee Report number 4, it clearly states that the United States Supreme Court's recent decision in United States versus Windsor held the Federal Defense of Marriage Act unconstitutional. Mr. Speaker, again, I submit to you that the Supreme Court's decision in the Windsor case only held Section 3 unconstitutional, not the entire Defense of Marriage Act. There was no rebuttal whatsoever to any of the contentions I made regarding this Standing Committee report, which leads me to only one of two things. Number one, capitulation by the majority. Number two, admission that what I'm saying was correct. So, Mr. Speaker, as I continue on going through the committee report, and with all due respect to you, Mr. Speaker, I am offended at what is in the Standing Committee report. As those of you know, this Standing Committee report will forever go into the history as our legislative intent, and yet it is replete with factual inaccuracies, misrepresentations, and incorrect information. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, on page 3, public hearing and testimony. Official public notice of your committee's public hearing on this measure was posted on October 28, 2013. The text of the governor's original proposed legislation was first released to the public by the governor on August 22, 2013. Mr. Speaker, I take great umbrage to that because, quite frankly, we all know that this bill that we're voting on, Senate Bill 1, this was not the governor's bill. Senate Bill 1 was in fact posted on October the 22nd at 5 o'clock p.m., 5.5 days before the first hearing. No wonder the public doesn't trust us. This committee report is inaccurate and it's misleading. The fact of the matter is there was a bait and switch regarding the bill that was heard before the public. So I take great umbrage to what is in this committee report. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I have never seen a committee report that goes out of its way to quote one particular testifier. It goes on and on about what Justice Levinson said, and with all due respect to Justice Levinson, he talks about what was actually in the language of House Bill 117, which actually led to the constitutional amendment posed to the voters in 1998. And while I must respectfully disagree with Justice Levinson, there can be no doubt that what the language that was in House Bill 117 was not, in fact, the language which was printed in the constitutional amendment and given to the people to vote on in 1998. Mr. Speaker, Senator Sakamoto, former state senator, testified, registration number 2576, submitted testimony making it clear that on House Bill 117, which eventually led to constitutional amendment in 1998, he quoted the language from the two co-chairs of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Senator Matsunaga claimed, and this is directly from the Journal, quote, essentially, it accomplishes what we sought to achieve last year. That is, marriage licenses will be limited to opposite-sex couples. But coupled with the passage of House Bill 118, non-traditional couples will be provided access to substantially similar economic marital rights and benefits, unquote. Senator Chumley, who was also a co-chair, talks about the 1998 amendment. Quote, the amendment before us today is as finely tailored as we could accomplish. The people will decide on the simple issue of whether marriage should be limited to couples of the opposite sex. The courts are not insulted, equal protection is not conditioned, and no religious or social dogma is adopted. Instead, an affirmative expression of our understanding of marriage is incorporated into the Supreme law of the land, unquote. Senator Sakamoto states in his written testimony, as you will see by reviewing what was said on the Senate floor in 1997, the constitutional amendment was proclaimed as the vehicle to limit marriage to opposite-sex couples. The people voted with that in mind. So it is Senator Sakamoto, who was a part of the 1997 legislature, that again, the language that was voted on was clear to the people. You know, it's just been so upsetting these past couple of days. There's been allegations of people going back and forth, and why are we doing this? You know, some of my colleagues have said to me, well, we're doing this because we have no choice.
Speaker, I yield my second time.
So ordered.
Thank you. Some of my colleagues have said, we have to do this before the courts do it. I would submit, Mr. Speaker, let's look at the facts. They're referring to the Jackson versus Abercrombie case. Let's look at the facts. The state won in the Jackson versus Abercrombie case. And yet, yes, that case is on appeal with the Ninth Circuit, but the fact of the matter is, if the state loses, they can still always appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I would remind members of this body, no court in the United States, including the U.S. Supreme Court, has ever said same-sex marriage is a fundamental right. So quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, I feel quite confident that we shouldn't lie to the public and give off the impression that we're passing this bill on behalf of the churches for the exemptions, because again, how much more can they take? You know, Mr. Speaker, I want to get to the hearing very quickly. You know, many people will say that the Senate was terse and they were cruel, that they didn't hear the public. You know, Mr. Speaker, while I absolutely appreciate the fact that we gave the people the opportunity to testify, I would submit that we were masochistic. We listened to 57 hours of testimony, and within 2 hours, we came up with a decision. And again, overwhelmingly, resoundingly, the message that resonated was vote no, kill the bill, let the people decide. It was not amend the bill. That was not the message. And so again, Mr. Speaker, I feel that a great injustice is occurring today. You know, Mr. Speaker, over the past couple of days, we've all received hate emails. I've been called everything under the sun. I've received every hate email in the world, every threat in the world. You know, on the first day of the hearing, a well-known member of the LGBT community followed me outside every time and verbally assaulted me, to the point where I had to contact the sergeants and ask them for protection. You know, Mr. Speaker, this issue has brought out the ugly in our society. And I feel that we can no longer, by going in this direction with the process, we have failed the people. You know, rising tides are supposed to float all boats, but instead the equality of one minority is balanced on the backs of others. What people saw over the past 12 days is that democracy is democracy in name only. A democracy that only cares what people think when it is convenient for them. The people came to speak and were rebuked by what they saw as unsympathetic elected officials, ones that were called pilau. Mr. Speaker, I refuse to believe that this is a democracy in name only. I refuse to believe that government has failed the people. And in fact, we still have a factual situation that exists, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 5, that would allow a constitutional amendment for the people to vote, is still alive. It is still in the Judiciary Committee. It has been referred to the Judiciary Committee and the Finance Committees. We still have the ability to give people a chance to vote on this issue.
Your time is up.
My time.
So ordered.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. So, Mr. Speaker, I refuse to believe that democracy is broken. I want to believe in our government. But what we've displayed over the past 12 days doesn't give people a lot of hope. Mr. Speaker, I'm asking you once again, House Bill 5 would give people the right to vote. That has been the chant over the past 12 days. Respectfully, Mr. Speaker, I ask you to prove to these people that democracy is not democracy in name only, that we are a government of the people and by the people, that we listen to the people of the state of Hawaii. Mr. Speaker, for these reasons, I once again renew my request to you and the Judiciary Chair and the Finance Chair to please hear House Bill 5 and let the people vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Second time in support of the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you. And essentially, Mr. Speaker, this issue is about those who want to provide a privilege to a group of people and those who want to deny a privilege to a group of people. And the legislators who want to provide a privilege will always have the higher ground in that argument. And if legislators have been unfair to the public, it's because not all legislators have been honest about their motives and why they don't favor the bill. I'm disappointed with legislators who don't take responsibility for the circumstances they're in, because they need to have the energy and compassion in this room, that same energy and compassion that was on their campaign brochures that they gave to the public. And if this issue has brought out the ugly in some people, it's the ugly that has already existed in some people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion?
Brief rebuttal, Mr.
All right,
Speaker.
members,
Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion?
Mr. Speaker. Brief rebuttal. Mr. Speaker.
You've already had 15 minutes, Representative.
Mr. Speaker, there was time that was yielded to me, and this is my rebuttal.
Make it short.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that you respectfully please allow me the latitude that you've allowed to other members. I do realize that it is late, but again, this is a democracy. We have the ability to debate.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I take great umbrage to my colleagues, once again calling us names. That's the easy way out. Calling me a bigot, a homophobe, a racist, that's the easy way out, that I haven't evolved. Again, this is about the process, a process that has failed the people of the state of Hawaii. As I mentioned on second reading, those of us who are all about repealing the Public Land Development Corporation because it was about openness in government, transparency, public engagement, and that was lost in the PLDC, and that's why people wanted to repeal the PLDC. We even had a hearing on a Saturday for our neighbor islanders and those who worked. We couldn't even afford that same luxury for this particular measure because, again, the outcome was preordained. People's minds were already made up. So I take great umbrage to one of my colleagues saying that somehow we are any less for what we believe. And again, this is exactly the reason why we need to make Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1 a better bill, because regardless of what you think, your rights to think, your freedom of conscience is protected. And nobody should be subjected to name calling because of what they think.
All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. All right, we've had extensive debate, and is there anyone else who have not spoken, wish to? Marcus, I've been waiting for you.
Can I have a short recess,
All
Mr.
right,
Speaker?
come on. Up there. Okay. Representative.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I've been sitting here for several hours now, listening to my colleagues. And in some respect, I appreciate their comments because I believe that they have been listening to the conversations of the last several weeks, to each other, most importantly to the people. So I appreciate that. But I still can't shake it from me, and I still will leave this special session, whenever it ends, with a terrible and nasty and bad taste in my mouth, as if someone had shoved something vile and putrid and rotten down my throat. And I think I speak for many out there who have come to the belief this dog and pony show is well on its way to its final, terrible conclusion. So let me try this one more time, Mr. Speaker. Now that the governor has called us into special session, like prior governors, it is the legislative branch. It is the legislative branch that controls our own destiny. We do not have to move upon this bill. It is our responsibility. It is our decision. And upon that, individually and collectively, will history judge us, Mr. Speaker. So I would like to remind my colleagues on the other chamber that they will have an opportunity to review the record that we have produced for them over the last 50 some odd hours or 5 days of public hearing and testimony, to maybe correct the errors of their ways on their first initial hearing, that they might reconsider their prior decision on passing the bill out unamended and learn from us in the House of Representatives. So there's still time, Mr. Speaker. There is still time. It goes back to what I've been telling the people over the last 5, 6 weeks. What is the rush? What is the rush to do what is right, to do what is pono for all people? My friends in the gay community, my friends in the straight community, my friends in the religious community, my friends in the irreligious community. What's the rush? There is no rush, Mr. Speaker. Let me talk a little bit about this bill and the grave concerns I have. You know, one of the things I told people on the road is this: a fear that I have, a grave fear that I have, is that if any of these provisions are struck down and found unconstitutional, and is challenged in court, it is the governor who can choose not to defend the law. And this governor has chosen not to defend the law regarding the marriage statute on the books today. That was approved by some of my colleagues back in 1994. He has chosen not to. And for me, as a legislator, Mr. Speaker, I have grave fears that anything in this measure here that does not comport to the Constitution may not be defended by our governor. And that's why I've been speaking up repeatedly over and over and over again and begging the indulgence of my colleagues and you, Mr. Speaker, to fix this bill. We still have time to fix this bill. There is no need to rush. There is no need to rush. If we don't do this right, Mr. Speaker, how are we going to begin to heal our community? That's a decision we have to make. And that's why we are here today. Mr. Speaker, I've had this poster on my door for several weeks now. Conflicts between same-sex marriage and religious conscience are reasonably foreseeable, and for that very reason are unnecessary when a prudent legislature acts decisively to protect complementary human values, liberty and equity, by adopting language that enables both interests.
Mr. Speaker, I yield my time.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. By adopting language that enables both interests to be protected realistically. Without such legislative safeguards, many religious individuals will be forced to engage in conduct that violates their deepest religious beliefs, and religious organizations will be forced to engage in conduct that will be constrained in crucial aspects of their exercise of their religion. Hence, the legislature should take care to ensure that the legalization of same-sex marriage does not restrict the inalienable right of religious liberty. This is entirely consistent, Mr. Speaker, with the Hawaii State Constitution that each member of the state legislature has sworn to uphold and protect. Since its adoption in 1950 and ratification in 1959, the Hawaii Constitution has always protected religious freedom in the strongest terms. I've been citing and quoting to a lot of the legal experts who have spent their careers and lives on this issue. And I'll give a shout out right now to Professor Laycock, who just as recently as 2 days ago communicated to me via email on a comment I had regarding the proposed language here in Connecticut. His response to me was that this language is really inadequate, insufficient what we're trying to do, and may lead to further troubles. But what I found really intriguing to me as I reflected upon what he was doing, that even before he was going to make his oral argument on behalf of the City of Greece case before the United States Supreme Court, he felt this issue for Hawaii was worthy enough to spend some time to get back to me, a nobody, to share his comment. He had his argument the other day. He's representing, Mr. Speaker, just so you know who this man is, an atheist who does not believe in any religion before the highest court in the land to defend our rights to be free from religion and to practice religion. The aloha state can be welcoming both to same-sex couples and to citizens of your state who object to providing goods and service to these couples, not because they are gays, but because of the religious basis for their understanding of marriage. Such persons reach the decision in good conscience for a positive reason, not a negative one. They view marriage as a religious institution and the wedding ceremony as a religious sacrament. Finally, and this is the concern. Once the bill is passed, those opposed to any exception for religious communities will give the narrowest possible interpretation to all exceptions. For this reason, Mr. Speaker, the legislature ought to take enough time to write legislation consonant with President Obama's sage counsel. On an issue as sensitive as this, knowing that Americans hold a wide range of views based on deeply held beliefs, maintaining our nation's commitment to religious freedom is also vital. Mr. Speaker, without adequate safeguards for religious liberty of the sort proposed, the recognition of same-sex marriage will lead to socially divisive and entirely unnecessary conflicts between the exercise of rights pursuant to the same-sex marriage law and religious liberty. This is a destructive path leading to needless loss by both sides. A balanced middle way leads to a win-win solution for both sides. The Hawaii State Legislature should avoid both extremes and be wise peacemakers. May I have permission, Mr. Speaker, to submit further written comments?
So ordered, Representative.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support.
Proceed.
I assume that the chanting will start shortly because someone just went upstairs. So anyway, if I start shouting loudly, everybody, I apologize, but I want to be heard. You know, Mr. Speaker, and to everyone here, you know, I really honor everyone. There isn't anybody that's wrong. I think everybody has their truth, The truth comes from your own experience, your own values, probably taught by your parents, maybe by your teacher, maybe by your church. But you grow up and you come to have strong values. And I think what we honor today is the value of each and every one of our colleagues and what they say. It's their truth. I honor that truth. But I want people to know that when I came here, knowing that I was called into special session, I changed all my plans, my personal life plans, because I was called and it was my duty. I felt it was my duty to be here. So I came here with that open-mindedness. Let's see what's before us. Now, I happen to have been here 11 years, and I'm a chair of a committee. And normally people bring ideas and they present them in front of you. You get those ideas, and then you go, well, what's in the bill? What are we trying to achieve here? And from the very beginning, after I read it, I went, well, I can't support this bill the way it's written. And when people would call me up and say, well, how are you going to vote? My answer always was, well, if it stays in its current form, I'm voting no. But if we can find a way to protect religious freedom, I'm going to vote yes. So I had to go in the paper as undecided. And why did I have to do that? Because I found out very quickly, if I told a person I was going to go no on Senate Bill 1, they were running out telling everybody I was going to vote no. And I go, no, no, no. They don't get it, is I want balance. Now that fair and balance came from my upbringing. You know, my upbringing in the early 1970s, in 1971, my cousin married a black man. It was the first interracial marriage in the community and the family, and everybody freaked out. They just didn't know how to handle it. But as time went on and they got to know them, they got over that. And they didn't see color anymore. They just saw them as good citizens, caring, not hurting other people, and really living a good life. And so, you know, my values, what I brought to the table is no different than anybody else here today. We brought what comes from within us. And for me, I want to go on the record saying I was always wanting to try the balance, because I believe that government should not go into people's homes and tell them what their value and belief system is.
Representative, I believe your time has elapsed.
Okay, so thank you. So anyway, so I'm glad everybody came. I'm glad everybody shared, and wish everybody aloha.
Thank you very much, Representative. All right, members, now that everyone
Speaker.
has spoken.
1 second, please.
Yes.
I entirely agree with the previous speaker who said the government should not...
What's your purpose in speaking to me?
This is second time against.
You wish to speak the second time?
Yes.
All right, go
I
right
have
ahead.
3 minutes, I understand, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to agree with the previous speaker who said the government should not be going into people's homes and telling them what to believe or what to do. But, Mr. Speaker, the government should not be going into the churches and telling those people what to believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to be calling for the vote now.
Mr. Speaker, I'll defer to the Majority Leader, Mr. Speaker.
Beg your pardon, sir. You yield?
Mr. Speaker?
Yes. Mr.
May I have permission to insert comments into the journal?
State.
May I have permission
to
insert comments into the journal?
So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, same request.
So ordered.
Thank you.
Same request, Mr. Speaker, in opposition.
So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, same request. Mr.
So
Speaker,
ordered.
same request.
So ordered. Any more comments for the journal?
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Say, Speaker Say.
Will I be the last person to speak on this particular measure, since I'm the most quietest one and the silent one from this
Please proceed.
side of the chamber? Mr. Speaker and members of the House, this evening I am in support with reservations. With reservations as far as what has been said on the floor of the House in regards to the process. I truly believe that at the start of this special session, I don't know how, sincerely and honestly how the House leadership determined that we're going to use a Senate vehicle. Anytime you go into a special session, you have to have that bill in final form to meet that 5 days. That was the agreement with the leadership telling the caucus we're going to do it in 5 days as far as a special session. It did not occur that way, and I can respect the chair of Judiciary and the chair of Finance for doing an excellent job of the 57 hours of public deliberation. The concern now is this. There was a group here on this floor that had proposed floor amendments in strengthening the House Draft 1. The warning that you have heard this evening is a very honest, committed warning in not seeing that this state that we all love will be divided as we leave these chambers. Mr. Speaker, I am in support with reservations because I believe that my brothers and sisters who are gays and lesbians should be given the same opportunity as a local Chinese American who has been discriminated on the mainland. I believe that we did not go far enough on the floor amendments that was on Wednesday in the religious protection, which I told the neighborhood boards of Palolo, St. Louis Heights, and Kaimiki Neighborhood Board. I truly believe and dream that whatever happens with this particular measure to the Senate, that the Senate may consider going into conference and maybe strengthening it, or has a deal been done with House Draft 1. If there is lawsuits that come before the courts in the out years, we did not fulfill our obligation. And the reason why is that we in the legislative body have deferred it to the courts. That is why the former majority leader tried his best in proposing the floor amendments on Wednesday. And that is the reason why I am with reservations, and I do support Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1, because to some degree, a small degree, they have accommodated me on the religious freedom provisions. I also have a speech, if you don't mind, I wanted to read to all of you in closing. And it was developed by one of my very good friends who's a pastor. And this is how it goes. Although we hold to separation of church and state in this country, today I wish to speak to the Christian community, for it is within this community that much of the most vocal debate has occurred around this time and this issue. There are Christians who vehemently oppose Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1, and there are Christians who are equally as passionate in their support of Senate Bill, House Draft 1. As you know, I am in support with reservations. Every society has its own particular rules and regulations about what is acceptable and expected of its members. This was also true during the time of Jesus. There were rules and norms that determined such things as social status, business practices, relationships between people, and religious obligations. Many of those are different from the rules and norms of today. What remains consistent for all of us, and which Jesus' entire ministry proclaimed, is a higher law of love. He summoned the commandments very simply, yet very profoundly. Love the Lord, your God, with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's Luke 10-27, Matthew, and Mark. This law of love, Mr. Speaker, is what enabled Jesus to do many things that were against the rules and norms of the day. He broke the rules of the Sabbath, healing and allowing his disciples to pluck the grain to feed themselves. He reached out to women considered unclean. He opposed the tyranny of misguided church leaders. He honored those of what we all here are doing, of the low social status and those relegated to the fringes of society, and also healing them, sitting at table with them, and even calling them to be his disciples. He really saw them, and he loved them.
Mr. Speaker, I yield my second 3 minutes.
Order.
The rules which were kept them separate, apart, different from within society, were not binding for Jesus. Following Jesus' death and resurrection, the belief in Jesus began to spread. And one of the first major controversies occurred amongst believers within the Jewish community. Since you folks should all know that Jesus was, after all, a Jew, and were all of his disciples. Concerning the Gentiles, the non-Jews, who also saw in Jesus the way of life for their future, and their hope, and for their disciples. In the 10th chapter of Acts, God goes to great trouble to prepare both the hearts of Peter and Cornelius, a Gentile centurion, to receive one another. As a good and law-abiding Jew, Peter would never have entertained the idea of eating at the table with Cornelius, nor would have Cornelius have entertained the idea of inviting himself in. After several visions from heaven, however, not only does Cornelius feels led to invite Peter to his home, and Peter felt led to eat at the table with Cornelius, but Peter also baptizes him and his entire household. This is what caused the controversy at that period in time. Increasingly, Gentiles were being led to the faith. A council was held in Jerusalem. Some staunchly held that Gentiles, God-fearers, as they were called, needed to be circumcised and needed to uphold the purity and dietary laws of the community. Others pointed out that this was hard even for them as Jews. Why would they put this yoke upon non-Jews as followers of Jesus? In the end, this later argument prevailed, and today Christians are not bound by purity and dietary laws, nor do boys need to be
Mr.
circumcised.
Speaker, I yield my remaining time. Thank you very much.
Order.
Thank you very much, Representative. That was a very seismic shift in understanding. What prevailed were not the rules or norms of the religious community of the day, but God's love as revealed in Jesus Christ. Today, we are faced with another seismic shift in understanding. We, too, need to act in love. As St. Paul stated in his first letter to the Corinthians, faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. I also stand firmly in the belief that we must love one another even as we disagree, that our language must not hurt, and it must not include name-calling, insulting actions, or hateful rhetoric. As a people, especially those of us who are Christian people, we must speak in love, even though we may disagree. What I've said to all of you on this floor may not change your opinion regarding Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1, but I hope it makes us think about the way we talk, the way we act, the way we debate this bill, and at the end of the day, that we remain committed to loving one another just as Jesus taught us. Thank you very much.
All right, Speaker Say, thank you very much. All right, now members.
I'm not going to speak, Mr. Speaker. Just kindly, can I have the words from the Speaker Emeritus be placed in the journal as if they were my own?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So ordered.
Mr.
So
Speaker.
ordered. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1. I rise in support of this measure.
Please proceed.
I just have some brief comments. I wanted to make some acknowledgments. First, as other members have already stated, thank you to the public for its involvement in one of our state's most significant public policy issues in recent history. Second, thank you to the staff and volunteers who assisted us. I know that the finance chair mentioned some staff members. I also wanted to mention in particular the print shop and the Legislative Reference Bureau for their assistance. Third, thank you to the Senate. Normally in a special session, the House and Senate agree upon the final version of the legislation before the session begins. In this case, there was no agreement. All that was agreed upon was that we would collaborate to reach a resolution on this issue. In particular, thank you to Judiciary Committee Chair Clayton He for his leadership. He is one of the strongest civil rights proponents in the legislature, and he has left a definite imprint on this legislation. Fourth, thank you to the 30 members of the House Judiciary and Finance Committees who sat through one of the most extraordinary public hearings in the history of the legislature. Thank you also to their co-chairs for their steadfast and reasoned approach throughout this session. Fifth, I would like to thank and acknowledge someone who has received little public recognition for the role that he has played in this issue. When the Hawaii Supreme Court made its initial ruling in Bear v. Lewin in 1993, it remanded the case to the Circuit Court so that a trial could be held to determine whether our marriage statute met the constitutional standard. The judge who presided over the trial was Circuit Court Judge Kevin Chang, who now serves as a federal magistrate. The trial ran for 6 weeks and was subject to intense public scrutiny. At the conclusion, Judge Chang ruled that based upon the evidence, the state did not meet its burden and that the statute was therefore unconstitutional. It was Judge Chang who categorically ruled that our marriage statute was unconstitutional. His findings and conclusions are still relevant to the arguments raised today, and I request permission to insert his written opinion into the journal.
So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I just wanted to say that this issue has been a rite of passage for each member of this body. I appreciate that the members heeded your request at the outset that we be civil and respectful of differing opinions. All of us, and particularly the advocates, must continue to be respectful, because true equality will be attained not simply by changing laws, but by changing people's perceptions and opinions. I have additional written comments for the journal, Mr. Speaker.
Sure.
And because everyone has spoken, I would like to call for the question, but please permit members to submit written comments. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Yes, Professor Ming.
Earlier, I asked for written comments. Just wanted to clarify that it's in support.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, members, I'm going to be calling for the vote. Representative
Speaker,
Saigi.
recess, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Recess, Mr. Speaker.
Recess.